Chapter 2599. Chu Yang couldn't help but smile when he thought of Shangguanlan's smile. Many people were surprised because there seemed to be something wrong with that smile. It was obviously weird. Chu Yang immediately noticed everyone's surprised eyes. His heart skipped a beat. I can't let the Jin Emperor know about such a little secret between me and Lan Lan. Otherwise, he will go crazy with jealousy. If the Jin Emperor went crazy with jealousy, then what he was going to do would be even crazier. At this moment, although Chu Yang knew that he was overthinking and was a little sensitive, he still felt sullen. He and Shangguanlan were in love, but he still had to care about the feelings of other men. Naturally, such a feeling was definitely one of the worst feelings in his life, but he had to endure it. Because of the sullen feeling in his heart, he ignored Kong Jingshi's couplet and directly said to the crowd, "What are you looking at? Haven't you seen Chu Yang's smile? Haven't you seen Chu Yang's smile full of mystery?" It was a pity that no one knew the so-called Mona Lisa's smile, otherwise Chu Yang would definitely be scolded to death. Everyone was speechless at Chu Yang's sudden outburst. This guy was simply crazy. Ha ha. Some people suddenly burst into laughter. They laughed so hard that their stomach seemed to hurt. God of fraud, you are out of your mind. You can't hold it in and go crazy. All the previous pretenses are all in vain. Haha, the god of fraud finally can't pretend anymore. It's really good news. It's really satisfying. The god of fraud can't pretend anymore. This is simply a fantastic story. Hurry up and record it. Maybe it will go down in history in the future. Yes, we must firmly remember such a scene. It will definitely be of great value in the future. It can't be bought with money. Because of these people, more people burst into laughter. Chu Yang couldn't help but touch his nose. He smiled slightly and said in his heart, I accidentally led a wave of shamelessness and got a lot of people's love. I can be said to be a real talent. Bullshit. If you want to act, you have to go all out. He said disdainfully, How can I break my cultivation? Don't you think I'm the world's most arrogant, most handsome, most talented book companion? In the painting, the dragon did not roar, the tiger did not roar, and the little study companion was laughable. At this moment, many people seemed to understand what was going on after hearing Chu Yang's words. It was obvious that Kong Jingshi had disdainfully referred to Chu Yang as a study companion, and Chu Yang was a little displeased. Interesting. According to my conclusion and research on how to scam a god, this is clearly the rhythm of a personal attack. In other words, it's already on the verge of scolding. You can say that. Later on, when we match the couplet, it might very well turn into a war of words. Isn't it obvious that the god of deception is telling us that we can't blame him later? The way to scam a god has always been like this. You've taken advantage of him, but you still want to pretend to be innocent. Not to mention when he's in the right. Needless to say, he'll definitely bully you to death. Hearing the discussions of the crowd, Kong Jingshi was a little confused. According to what the crowd said, he seemed to have really despised and belittled Chu Yang. After all, the words, study companion, had already expressed everything incisively and vividly. Oh no, I've belittled him so much. If I lose to him later, I'll really have no face left. I'll be embarrassed to death. He realized that things were bad, but there was no other way. Because things had already come to this. Chapter 2600. Checkmate me. Guard against him? What's the meaning of this? You want me to guard against being humiliated by him? How arrogant. Do you really think you've won? When Kong Jingshi heard such a couplet, he was instantly enraged. He said angrily, Orioles and swallows, green and red, harmonious and harmonious everywhere. Chu Yang could not help but smile in his heart. What a familiar phrase, what a familiar couplet. He also quickly said, Rain, rain, wind, 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 flower, flower, leaf, 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 year after year, day after day. My superior prestige, show me the courage of a tiger. Because of his pride and self-esteem, Kong Jingshi was angry. He coordinated with his anger and said such a sentence. It was extremely imposing and also extremely emotional. In an instant, everyone felt that the battle between the two of them was becoming more and more intense. When Chu Yang heard this sentence, he could not help but feel a trace of anger in his heart. Because, my superior prestige, show me the courage of a tiger, this sentence was indeed awe-inspiring and arrogant. It was indeed able to provoke people's nerve. He immediately said, "You're vulgar and despicable, show me half of your penis." Immediately, Kong Jingshi felt as if he had been hit by a stick. His vision turned black, and he almost fainted. This bastard is actually so vulgar and unrestrained. What kind of bullshit can he say? What kind of shit can he spit out? However, many people at the side had already burst into laughter when they heard Chu Yang's vulgar sentence. It's here, it's finally here. The legendary personal attack has finally arrived in person, haha. Haha, as expected of the god of cheating. If you dare to be arrogant, I dare to be arrogant by 3 times. If you want to anger me half to death, I'll definitely anger you to death. No, it should be like this. You're really bold, you actually dare to be vulgar in front of me. Don't you know that I'm the ancestor of vulgarity? Are you blind? It wasn't easy for me to be civilized, but you immediately beat me back to my original state. You really deserve to die 1,000 times for your sins. At least, in the eyes of the crowd, Chu Yang was definitely so. Therefore, many people had already gone crazy with laughter. The scene was lively and the whole place was filled with laughter. This, as Qin Guo listened to all these words and felt everything, he started to worry about Kong Jingshi for no reason. Based on everyone's reaction, Kong Jingshi had obviously fallen into Chu Yang's trap. No, that's not accurate. Instead, I should say that vulgarity seems to be Chu Yang's specialty. No one can beat him. As for Huang Fuxian, Shangguan Shao, Xie Xiubua, and the rest of the 6 great young masters of Taijing City, they suddenly realized that their understanding of Chu Yang was far less than that of the onlookers. Of course, the loud laughter of the crowd caused Kong Jingshi to be even more agitated. That was because every single one of them was laughing, every single one of them was saying that Chu Yang had already won, and that he was definitely going to lose. He didn't believe in this evil, and he couldn't get rid of those couplets that he had obtained. Because those couplets were vulgar enough, but they were also good enough to go further. For example, this sentence, "Plant trees in your house." He became even angrier and his voice grew louder. Chu Yang was even more disdainful. He glanced at Kong Jingshi and said word by word with extreme disdain, "Fish in your bathtub." Vulgarity indeed had its uses. At least in terms of anger, it had an obvious effect. With a whoosh, Kong Jingshi's anger rushed to his head, and blood rushed to his face. He gritted his teeth and retorted word by word, "Fish in my stomach." Chapter 2601. What the hell? He didn't understand. Using couplets to mock, ridicule and scold each other, but he really didn't understand. What was there to be proud of? What was there to mock? You scold me, I scold me. Victory hasn't been decided yet. What's there to be proud of? What's there to mock? Before he could understand what was going on, he heard Chu Yang's indifferent reply, "Your mother will personally cook. How dare you scold my mother?" He was furious and immediately scolded back. Suddenly, he realized that he had used up all the couplets he had received earlier. Instantly, his entire body shook. Following that, an extremely clear scene appeared in his mind. Couplets pierced through his intestines, causing him to vomit 3 liters of blood. The reason why Kong Jingshi had such a deep impression of these couplets was not only because they were extremely vulgar, but also because these couplets were accompanied by pictures. In the pictures, there were 2 people competing with each other, and the person who came up with the first couplet was pierced through his intestines, causing him to vomit 3 liters of blood. When he first saw this, he dismissed it with a laugh. Couplets were just for fun. Even if he didn't have a temper after being insulted, he wouldn't be pierced through his intestines, nor would he vomit 3 liters of blood. But now, it didn't seem to be an exaggeration, because he finally realized something. Oh no, I've been tricked. I've completely fallen for this despicable trick. Kong Jingshi's intuition told him that something was amiss. He realized that he might have been played for a fool, and the consequences were simply unimaginable. If news of him being played for a fool like this were to spread, he would definitely become a laughingstock. He would be laughed at until he died. How do you feel? At this moment, Chu Yang suddenly said to him, "My couplets aren't bad, right? And the pictures I drew aren't bad either, right? Piercing through your intestines, vomiting 3 liters of blood isn't too much, right? But why haven't you pierced your intestines and vomited 3 liters of blood until now? Could it be that your intestines are thicker, or your blood is thicker, or your skin is thicker?" Buzz buzz buzz. Those couplets are indeed his. I've really been tricked. Kong Jingshi no longer had any doubts in his heart. His mind buzzed and he immediately felt that the world was spinning. Between shame and anger, his internal organs were burning. He even faintly felt that his throat was itching, as if he was about to vomit something. This can't be. You can't do this even if you kill me. If this continues, I, Kong Jingshi, will no longer be able to live. With a plop, Kong Jingshi lost control of his body as he clenched his teeth. He staggered and fell to the ground in front of everyone. Haha, the god of deceit is indeed invincible. Kong Jingshi is about to faint from anger. He didn't just faint from anger. I think he has suffered internal injuries. However, the god of deceit is still not strong enough. Where is the 3 liters of blood that pierced through his intestines? When Kong Jingshi heard this, his vision darkened. He thought to himself, could it be that this is also part of that despicable person's plan? He was so angry that he almost vomited blood and fainted. At this moment, his current appearance could be said to be awkward to the extreme. It was as if he couldn't wait to find a hole in the ground and hide in it. Tragic to the extreme. Even Qin Guo, who was watching from the side, could not help but feel sympathy for him. Don't be in such a hurry to faint. Also, don't be in such a hurry to vomit blood. The victor has not been decided yet. Chu Yang stood in front of Kong Jingshi and looked down. However, this level is still not enough. It has not reached the level of piercing through his intestines and vomiting 3 liters of blood. As he spoke, he pointed to the crowd and said, "Did you hear that? Everyone is already complaining that I didn't let you pierce through his intestines and vomit 3 liters of blood. Although this is my fault, I ask for your cooperation." Kong Jingshi was extremely humiliated. He really wanted to die together with Chu Yang. However, he knew very well that he had already lost. He had completely lost. If this continued, he would lose even more miserably. He would be even more embarrassed and humiliated. When that time came, the humiliation would be even greater. It would even exceed his imagination. Chapter 2602. You were indeed a fraud god in the past. Chu Yang stared blankly for a moment. When he noticed everyone's reaction, he immediately realized Kong Jingshi's brilliance. With just this one sentence, Kong Jingshi easily dispelled his awkwardness and distress, and completely rescued him from this predicament. It had to be said that the nickname of Chu Yang, the fraud god, gave Kong Jingshi a lot of convenience. Of course, Kong Jingshi was really deceived by Chu Yang. Ha ha! The crowd at the side had already burst into laughter. You are indeed Kong Jingshi. Chu Yang could only praise Kong Jingshi. The reason was very simple. Kong Jingshi dared to admit defeat and mock himself. Among his past enemies there were very few people who dared to do so. However, logically speaking, Kong Jingshi should be even more arrogant than those people. Should I be thanking you for your compliment? Chu Yang thought highly of him. Kong Jingshi definitely didn't want to thank him. I just want to say that it's not bad to have a love rival like you. Chu Yang was speaking the truth. The existence of Kong Jingshi, Qin Guo, and the others might really be able to change things. Of course, such a sentence made Kong Jingshi very surprised. He had even keenly sensed something from Chu Yang's tone. I admit defeat. Kong Jingshi couldn't understand. He was too lazy to think about it. He directly admitted defeat. Next, it should be his turn to watch a good show from the side. Can I admit defeat? Chu Yang couldn't help but ask in his heart. He really wanted to admit defeat. However, he couldn't do so even if he wanted to. At this moment, Kong Jingshi and Qin Guo's positions swapped. Qin Guo was already standing in front of him. Tell me, what do you want to play? Chu Yang became a little irritated as he thought about the difficult matter in his heart. He was even more annoyed with Qin Guo. Both civil and martial, one civil and one martial. Qin Guo's voice was even more magnetic than Kong Jingshi's. Chu Yang was startled when he heard this voice. He was very sure that many women would fall in love with this voice and fall in love with this man. If there was a saying that one could recognize a beauty by their voice, then this saying was definitely applicable to Qin Guo, a beauty like him. Chu Yang looked at Qin Guo's handsome face. He couldn't find a single flaw. He couldn't help but admit that Qin Guo could be said to be doted on by the heavens. He was excessively beautiful. However, in terms of temperament, Qin Guo was somewhat inferior to Kong Jingshi. If Kong Jingshi is a scholar, then you are a martial artist, right? What did Qin Guo want to challenge? Chu Yang didn't need to ask. He already knew. Whether it was Qin Guo or Kong Jingshi, they would definitely not allow Chu Yang to have such a good reputation. With such a good reputation, Duke Jiu and the others would have too few reasons to object, and it would be too easy for Chu Yang to obtain Shangguanlan. Please, Chu Yang directly invited Qin Guo. Instantly, the surrounding crowd was thrown into chaos and scattered in all directions. Are the two of them going to fight here? If they fight here, this place will definitely be turned into ruins. Not only this place will be turned into ruins, the two of them might go berserk and erupt with their full strength. Taijing City might be turned into a mess. Chu Yang didn't have any reaction. It was as if the destruction of Taijing City had nothing to do with him. Qin Guo was the same. He didn't seem to care at all about the destruction caused by the fight between him and Chu Yang. The two of them just stood there, facing each other without moving an inch. Chapter 2603. Who is to blame and whose reputation is to be tarnished? Those who praise me should try it out. This is the reason why the third generation walked the path of righteousness. As this voice rang out from Qin Guo's body, a huge shadow appeared behind him. Then, the sound of reading rang out. It was the process of a child growing up into an adult, cultivating his body and mind, and managing the country and bringing peace to the world. At the same time, a faint smell of ink filled the whole place. Rumble. Qin Guo's body became hazy, and a loud rumbling sound came from inside, as if a dam was discharging water. It was as if a certain wheel of history was turning again and rolling forward. Immediately, a holy, peaceful, and righteous chi surged out from the deepest part of his body. Then, two tentacle-like rays of light floated out of his pupils, pure and holy. This was the state of Confucianism. Qin Guo entered the state of Confucianism in an instant, ready to fight with Chu Yang. Chu Yang's response was also very simple. He also entered the state of Confucianism, but his movements were much smaller. He entered the state of Confucianism with a slight movement. Chu Yang had already reached perfection in the state of Confucianism. He had returned to simplicity and reached a state where he could do whatever he wanted. Qin Guo could not compare with him at all. In the 9 reincarnations, how could he miss out on the state of Confucianism in order to defeat the Jin Emperor? Moreover, besides the state of Confucianism, He had not only mastered all the other states, but also reached the point where he could do whatever he wanted. Without comparison, it was impossible to tell who was better. With just this, Qin Guo knew that he had lost in this aspect. However, he reached out his hand and grabbed the peaceful and righteous qi that was surging within his body. He said, "This is Confucian qi, not awe-inspiring righteous qi." The special statement was very simple. Chu Yang is not the only one who can enter the state of Confucianism. I, Qin Guo, can also enter the state of Confucianism, and I am even stronger than you. You've only comprehended a single aspect of the way of Confucianism. So, you've formed the awe-inspiring energy. But I, Qin Guo, have comprehended the entire way of Confucianism. And I've cultivated the way of Confucianism. Confucianism is more comprehensive and stronger than righteousness. Chu Yang understood what he meant, but was too lazy to argue with him. You can make your move now. Do I need to make a move? Qin Guo sneered. You've already lost? Could it be that you don't even know that you've already lost? Hee hee. Chu Yang couldn't help but chuckle. When one entered the state of Confucianism or the state of immortals, they could indeed see a lot of things clearly. They could anticipate the details of the opponent's battle beforehand and know the outcome of the battle before the battle even started. It was already a victory or defeat. However, this was only possible when one was stronger than the other. If both parties were of similar strength, there would be a great variable in the prediction, just like the battle between Chu Yang and Rui Zi. If his strength was not as good as his opponent's, then the so-called prediction would only be a joke. The principle behind this was very simple. When one obtained the support of an era that had once existed, one would stand at an extremely high position and naturally be able to see through many things. For example, in the era of Confucianism, after entering the state of Confucianism, the world would be like a chessboard in one's eyes, and people like Qin Guo would be the chess player. From this, Qin Guo could naturally see a lot. But as mentioned before, this was based on Chu Yang's way of chess being far inferior to Qin Guo's. But how could Chu Yang's way of chess be weaker than Qin Guo's? I am to others, who is to blame and whose is to be praised. If one praises someone, one should try it out. This is the reason why the third generation of Confucianism went straight. Chapter 2604. Swoosh. Qin Guo's expression changed drastically. The words that came out of his body were more or less straightforward. This was one of the beliefs that Qin Xing believed in the early days. But because of this, there was once an expert who kindly reminded Qin Xing, saying that Qin Xing saw things too deeply and spoke too sharply. If he hurt some people of status, he would bring great danger to himself. When Qin Xing heard this, he further developed the idea of being kind to others. In the end, he established a moral theory with benevolence as the core. After that, there were even sayings like, "Do not do unto others as you would have them do unto you," and "A gentleman will fulfill the wishes of others, not the vices of others." This was the Confucianism of the heavenly soul world. But to Chu Yang, Qin Xing was actually Kong Xing, and the expert was actually Laozi. Confucius once asked Laozi for advice. What Chu Yang knew and the level of detail he knew far exceeded Qin Guo's imagination. Qin Guo was completely stunned. "Did you expect that I would use such a sentence to refute you?" Chu Yang saw Qin Guo's shocked expression and couldn't help but sneer. He warned, "You better not think too highly of yourself in front of me." Swords were drawn. What Chu Yang and Qin Guo said just now was nothing to ordinary people. However, to Kong Jingshi, Rui Zi, and the other young masters of the grand capital city, every word they heard made them shudder with fear and trepidation. Because such a confrontation seemed harmless, but it was actually the most dangerous. Especially Chu Yang, he was simply going to dig up the ancestral grave of Qin Guo's Confucianism. "You are saying that you are not weaker than me in terms of Confucianism?" Qin Guo was only stunned for a short while before he became completely indifferent. Chu Yang's words didn't affect him much. From this, it could be seen that Qin Guo was extremely confident in Confucianism. And he had ample reason to be so. The founder of Confucianism in the heavenly soul world was his ancestor. Not weaker than you? Chu Yang glanced at Qin Guo and for some reason, his anger surged. Where do you get that confidence from? In his previous life there was also Confucianism. Moreover, his knowledge of Confucianism in his previous life was not something Qin Guo and the others could compare with. He was the first to comprehend the state of Confucianism. He was also the first to obtain the inheritance of the Confucian era. He was also the only one who had obtained the Great Harmony Sutra. Yet, Qin Guo dared to be so presumptuous in front of him. You want to talk about Confucianism again, right? Qin Guo was about to retort when he heard this, but before he could reply, Chu Yang had already spoken first. Chu Yang's voice was even colder. Don't keep repeating in front of me that your Confucian qi is better than my noble qi. Before that, you'd better understand what it means to get rid of the dross and extract the essence. Are you going to say that this is a joke again? How can there be any dross in the Confucian path? Without the dregs, how could the era of Confucianism be destroyed? Are you going to say that Confucianism is not wrong, but that it has not been properly led? Chu Yang said a bunch of things and then said sarcastically, "This is called foresight, do you understand? What you want to do, I have already foreseen in advance." After a pause, he pointed at Qin Guo and said coldly, "You are just a dross in front of me." Swish. Qin Guo's face suddenly turned red, and then he flew into a rage. "Bastard, do you really think that without you, no one can inherit the Confucianism, and no one can create the civilization of the Confucianism and the prosperity of the Confucianism again?" Chapter 2605. You're saying that I touched the epoch of Confucianism, comprehended the righteous energy, and obtained the inheritance of the epoch. I stole your fortune, right? Isn't that the case? Chu Yang was even angrier. He couldn't help but sneer. Putting everything else aside, you're saying that Confucianism belongs to your Qin clan. What a bold claim. Humph. Qin Guo naturally knew that the path of Confucianism was developed through the joint efforts of many people, but so what? In his opinion, Confucianism belonged to his Qin clan. Therefore, he said righteously, am I wrong? If my Qin clan's ancestor didn't create Confucianism, there wouldn't be Confucianism, and there wouldn't be an epoch of Confucianism. Confucianism was created by Qin Xing of the Qin clan. Chu Yang was the first to disagree. The Confucianism in his heart was never the Confucianism of the heavenly soul world, but the Confucianism of his previous life. Even if it wasn't for this, he would never agree with such a view. He directly dug up Qin Guo's ancestral grave and laughed angrily. Who told you that Confucianism was created by your clan's ancestor? Do you have proof? Is there enough proof? Moreover, as far as I know, the ancestor of Confucianism might not be your Qin clan's ancestor. The world still has doubts about this. Chu Yang knew very well about the heavenly soul world's path of Confucianism. The founder of the path of Confucianism in the heavenly soul world was indeed Qin Xing, but Chu Yang couldn't bear to see Qin Guo take the path of Confucianism for himself. What a joke! Joke my ass! Qin Guo retorted, but Chu Yang cut him off. His voice grew colder and colder. In this world, there is only one founder of Confucianism, and that is Confucius. Your clan's ancestor was just a disciple of Confucius. The reason why he was thought to be the founder of Confucianism was because the disciples of Confucianism wanted to protect Confucius. They asked your clan's ancestor to pretend to be Confucius. That's why there is such a misunderstanding. Do you really think you're something? Boom. These things that Chu Yang had tossed out had fiercely shocked everyone. The ancestor of Confucianism was not Qin Xing, but Kong Sheng. It was such an unfamiliar name. Moreover, Chu Yang also gave a very logical reason, so for a moment, the crowd was in an uproar. Moreover, because Chu Yang was the first inheritor of the Confucian epoch, even if he was making things up, his words still carried great weight. It could be said that Chu Yang's words today would definitely cause a great commotion. Bastard, how dare you spout such nonsense? Qin Guo's face and ears were red, his neck was thick, his 7 apertures were almost smoking. He was so angry that he was like a raging fire. What's the point of yelling over there? Chu Yang was already in a bad mood. Now that he had met someone like Qin Guo, he was even angrier. He glanced at Qin Guo from the corner of his eyes and said, "Take out the battlefield you've prepared and start fighting. I don't have time to waste with you." "As you wish." Qin Guo gritted his teeth so hard that they were about to shatter. He took out a white pearl and threw it into the sky. Whoosh! As soon as the white pearl entered the sky, it immediately expanded infinitely. In an instant it seemed to be as big as a star. There were suns, moons, stars, mountains, rivers, lakes, flowers, birds, insects, fish, and so on. This was a dimensional world, and an extremely solid one at that. It was completely transparent, so when people looked up from below, they could immediately see the scene inside clearly. Qin Guo had naturally prepared such a dimensional world for his battle with Chu Yang. Such extravagance immediately caused the densely packed crowd to turn into a wave. The cries of surprise were like the sound of waves, rising and falling one after another. Whoosh! Chapter 2606. At that moment, the discussion became even more intense. Who do you think will win, King Shen or Qin Guo? Needless to say, King Shen can predict all of Qin Guo's actions in the state of Confucianism. Obviously, King Shen is much stronger than Qin Guo, so King Shen is sure to win. That's hard to say. After all, that dimensional world belongs to Qin Guo. There might be something fishy in it. So what if there is something fishy? Who can cheat King Shen? So, I'm not worried about that. On the contrary, Qin Guo seems to be a little too weak, so I feel that something is wrong. Generally speaking, everyone was optimistic about Chu Yang. In fact, many people had an inexplicable confidence in Chu Yang. But this battle hadn't started yet. And the result hadn't come out yet. So, it was still hard to say. At this time, Chu Yang and Qin Guo had completely entered the dimensional world and appeared in a vast desert. The desert was so vast that it was unknown how many tens of thousands of miles long it was. The scorching sun hung high in the sky, and when the sunlight shone down, it was like falling on pieces of gold, giving off a layer of golden light. It was very beautiful. The entire desert looked like a yellow palace. Whoosh whoosh. In the golden desert the wind kept whistling. Soon there was a sky full of yellow sand sweeping over. The people below not only saw everything in the dimensional world clearly, but also heard it very clearly. Bastard die. As soon as they entered the dimensional world, before people could carefully feel everything, Qin Guo seemed to hate Chu Yang very much and immediately attacked. He moved with anger and disappeared in an instant. But he seemed to be everywhere like the wind in the desert. Chu Yang landed on the desert. His feet stepped on the sand, and he immediately felt a great heat. He couldn't help but squint his eyes. But just when he squinted his eyes slightly, Qin Guo, who had disappeared into thin air, immediately reappeared. Qin Guo appeared in front of Chu Yang, and was definitely not behind him. His movements were also very simple. He directly smashed out with his fist. Instantly, the 6 scriptures of poetry, book, etiquette, music, changes, and spring and autumn appeared and revolved around his fist like 6 planets, as well as the 6 paths of reincarnation. When the fist struck out, the 6 meridians appeared. It was as if the 6 Tao had manifested. It was majestic and grand, and it was extremely imposing. A wave of boundless mighty force immediately rushed out, causing people's hearts to tremble and their souls to tremble. During this process, 2 more tentacle-like rays of light floated out from Qin Guo's eyes. Although they were the same as the previous 2 rays of light, they were thicker and closer to the center. This punch was really too shocking. Before it fell, before it even reached Chu Yang, it had already rolled up yellow sand that filled the sky. Heaven and earth immediately turned yellow. Yellow sand filled the sky, covering the sun and sky. Nothing could be seen in the darkness, and it did not calm down for a long time. People were very curious, but they could only make guesses based on what they had seen before. What's the result? Did King Shen win, or did Qin Guo win? King Shen's cultivation is only at the Nirvana realm. I'm afraid it's a little difficult. Aren't you a little stupid to say this? Let's not talk about King Shen's true strength first. Now that the heavenly Tao has undergone a great change, the sage, earthly sovereign, and great emperor realms will be redefined in the future. Who will break through at this time? That's why King Shen and the other geniuses studied the eras. If they obtained the inheritance of a certain era, their strength would definitely not be inferior to the great emperor. Chapter 2607. Just now, I saw that Qin Guo seemed to have used the inheritance of other eras in addition to the Confucian era. That shouldn't be the inheritance of other eras. It should be the second state of the Confucian state, the son of an era. The Confucian state could be divided into 4 levels according to the depth of understanding and mastery of the Confucian era: era inheritor, era son, era lord, and era transcendence. The era inheritor was actually very simple. The Confucian era naturally didn't just have an inheritor who could obtain the inheritance after obtaining the initial recognition. The era son was like the crown prince, while the Confucian era was the emperor. All the inheritors were the princes. The emperor of the Confucian era was further selected from the princes to inherit the emperor's throne. This was the era son. This stage was actually the most difficult one. However, after becoming the crown prince, it was not certain that one would become the emperor. One would still have to be challenged by many princes. However, if one truly became the emperor, that would be the 3rd stage, becoming the epic master. The 4th stage was the era transcendence. As the name implied, it meant that one had transcended a certain era's civilization. For example, the Confucian era was the Confucian immortal. Many people knew about this, especially those at the level of the 6 great young masters of Taijing City. They were already very clear about this. Therefore, when someone raised such a point of view, many people couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. If that's the case, doesn't it mean that Qin Guo has been pretending to be weak just now in order to deceive the pit deity? It's all for this attack. If that's really the case, the pit deity is probably doomed this time. People had many guesses, but they were only guesses in the end. They could only wait and see what the truth was. What's the point of playing this game? Do you really think I don't know? Don't waste time. Just use the 4th gear. Otherwise, you won't have a chance. In the dimensional world, the sky full of yellow sand didn't fall, but Chu Yang's disdainful voice was heard. What was more shocking was that not only did he not fall into Qin Guo's trap, but he also made Qin Guo use the 4th gear of the Confucian state. Qin Guo didn't give any response. Then, everyone saw the blazing light of the great sun burning all the yellow sand in the dimensional world. Instantly, everything was clear and there was nothing blocking their vision. Immediately after that, the crowd saw that Qin Guo had already leaped into the air and was throwing a punch at Chu Yang. His fist was the small sun that people had just seen. The fist was crystal clear, and there seemed to be a dimensional world in it. To be exact, it was the Confucian era. Everything about the Confucian way was shown in the fist. At this level, he was at least at the 3rd grade of the Confucian state. The epic master, Qin Guo, seemed to have transformed into the epic lord of Confucianism, controlling the entire epoch of Confucianism to crush Chu Yang. This was already incomparably shocking, but it was not over yet. When the fist was about to hit Chu Yang, an ethereal figure flew out of the fist that represented the entire epic. Like a flying immortal, it instantly left the entire epic and looked down on the entire Confucian epic from outside the world. Heavenly Fairy. The fourth grade of the Confucian state, Confucian immortal. Everyone looked at such a fist. After being shocked, they couldn't help but feel a little confused. In such a short time, Qin Guo had directly reached the fourth grade of the Confucian state and used the Confucian immortal form to fight to the death with Chu Yang. Everyone was surprised, but they found that Chu Yang was not surprised at all. In the face of Qin Guo's fist, there was only contempt on his face. It was as if he didn't care about Qin Guo and the fourth grade of the Confucian state at all. What is he relying on? Chapter 2608. The fourth level of the state of Confucianism. Qin Guo's fist was like the sun, like the era of Confucianism, with the image of flying immortals. The yellow sand all over the sky was wiped out like smoke, as if it was destroying the world. Its momentum was hard to describe with words. Such a punch seemed to make people feel that the end of the world was coming, or that the destruction of the era of Confucianism was once again played out at this moment. Chu Yang's face was calm, and he calmly punched out. Suddenly, a long man about 2 meters tall, 9 feet 6 inches long appeared. There was a depression in the middle of his head, like a chiu, high in all directions and low in the middle. This long man was Confucius, at least the Confucius in the historical records. In the saying of the origin of Confucius's name, Chiu, there was a saying, Wei Yen Wu. Top Yin Ding. Wei Ding Yen Wu Yi, so Confucius's head was like a reverse universe. Reverse universe, like the opposite of the house, low in all directions and high in all directions. This meant that there was a depression in the middle of Confucius's head. I am also cheap, so I can do many despicable things. The difficult life of Confucius when he was young was immediately revealed. Jun Jun, Chun Chun, father, son. When Confucius was in the state of Qi, he talked about music with Grand Preceptor Qi, heard the beauty of Xiao music, and did not know the taste of meat for 3 months. Then, Duke Jing of Qi asked Confucius about politics, and Confucius's deeds in the state of Qi were all revealed. He did not pick up lost things on the road, and did not close his door at night. Then, what appeared was Confucius's governance of the state of Lu, and then he was forced to leave the state of Lu, and took a group of disciples to travel around the various countries, passing through Wei, Chao, Song, Jing, Chun, Kai, Yi, Chu, and so on. During this time, in Kuang, Song, Pu, and other places, Confucius and his group were trapped many times. The danger of the Song dynasty, the ferocious administration of the country, the imprisonment of the Chun Kai dynasty, and many other similar events also appeared. The life of Confucius was displayed one by one in Chu Yang's fist. It was as if he had reenacted the life of Confucius. I was 15 years old and determined to learn, 30 years old and not doubting, 50 years old and knowing the destiny, 60 years old and obedient, 70 years old and following my heart's desire, not exceeding the rules. This was the last vision, and also the conclusion of Confucius's life. And with this vision, with the end of Confucius's life, Chu Yang's punch just happened to meet Qin Guo's punch. In an instant, something completely unexpected happened. The infinite radiance on Qin Guo's fist disappeared. The world disappeared, the Confucian epic disappeared, the otherworldly flying immortal disappeared. All of the grand images, all of the frightening auras, all of the boundless power disappeared as if they had never existed. In other words, everything was unreal and illusory, just like a bubble. With a light touch, everything would vanish and there would be nothing left. Perhaps it would be more appropriate to call it Sea City's Chen Lu. After all, Qin Guo's punch had shaken everyone to their core. As for Chu Yang, in the eyes of the crowd, it was as if he had just casually extended his fist and touched the bubble. It was as if he had done it effortlessly. It could be said that as soon as they came into contact, everything ended. There was no world-shaking battle, nor was there any huge explosion or overturning of the world. There was nothing at all, making everything seem so unreal, like a dream, like a joke. However, at this time, Chu Yang had already come out of the dimensional world, and he did not even look at Qin Guo. However, at this moment, no one had reacted. Just like that, their eyes followed Chu Yang's movements, and they just watched Chu Yang leave in a daze without making a sound. Wait! Qin Guo's voice, Qin Guo's trembling and chaotic voice. Hearing his voice, it seemed that everyone could see that at this moment, his mind was blank, as if it had been stirred into a mass of paste. Chapter 26:10. How did you do it? Chu Yang didn't stop when he heard such a voice. I didn't do anything. I just burst your dream. Can you be more specific? I beg you. Qin Guo was such a person, yet he actually said such a thing. Although Chu Yang was surprised, he didn't stop his footsteps. A plop sound came from behind Chu Yang. Qin Guo flew out of the dimensional world and directly knelt down in front of Chu Yang. I beg you to give me a few pointers. Thud. Chu Yang finally had to stop. Do you know what it means to build a castle in the air? The era of Confucianism once existed, and there were also Confucian immortals. Therefore, logically speaking, it shouldn't be a problem to raise the state of Confucianism to the 4th level. However, the era of Confucianism has been destroyed, and everything has become illusory. But I can still get the support of the era of Confucianism. For example, the state of Confucianism. Didn't you also feel it? Is it also illusory? Qin Guo really didn't understand. When Chu Yang paused, he suddenly rushed to ask. Although there are remnants of the era of Confucianism, what makes you think that the era of Confucianism, which is struggling at death's door, will do its best to support you? You found the reason why the era of Confucianism was destroyed, and you gave the era of Confucianism hope? Qin Guo was taken aback for a moment. He seemed to understand Chu Yang's meaning. The era of Confucianism had already been destroyed. Although it still existed, its strength was definitely not enough. Facing such an unrestrained demand like him, they would only draw a pie in the sky. They would definitely not bet all their bets on him. Therefore, he wanted to raise the state of Confucianism to the 4th level. At least, he wanted to prove that his philosophy of Confucianism could make it reach the level of Confucian immortals. Of course, his philosophy couldn't be copied from the era of Confucianism. He had to have a new idea. Only then would he have value of investment, but did he have it? He might have it in the future, but at least he didn't have it now. Chu Yang was being polite when he said that the state of Confucianism was built on the 4th level of the castle in the air. To be honest, he did not have any ideals to support all of this. The reason why it appeared was because of the symbolic support of the remaining Confucian era. Therefore, this power was very illusory. However, only Chu Yang could say that this power was illusory. Others didn't have this ability because even though this was only a symbolic support from the Confucian epoch, this power was still extremely terrifying. Therefore, in essence, Qin Guo was defeated so miserably because Chu Yang's understanding of the Confucian Tao was far from what he could compare to. This caused him to be treated as a stepchild in the Confucian Tao epoch, while Chu Yang was raised by his own mother. Tui! What a bunch of nonsense! When Qin Guo understood all of this, he could not help but curse. However, he could not help but feel admiration in his heart. This logic seemed simple, but if no one had pointed it out, it would be impossible to understand. I owe you a favor, but you better not think that I will leave because of this. As Qin Guo spoke, he suddenly stopped. Then, he realized that he was the only one who was farting. There was no one around to smell his stinky fart. While he was in a daze, the dense crowd had all moved away. At this moment, he could only see the tail of the crowd. Needless to say, Chu Yang, he couldn't even see Kong Jingshi's shadow. They must have gone to Duke Jiu's residence. Whoosh! Qin Guo immediately rushed over. When he arrived, the scene was not as lively as he imagined. Instead, he felt very depressed. Chapter 26:11. At this moment, Chu Yang's face was extremely gloomy, and he was on the verge of exploding in anger. On the opposite side of Chu Yang was a middle-aged man in white clothes. He was dignified, refined, and calm. He had a handsome face and an extraordinary temperament. At first glance, one could tell that this person was of noble status and had extraordinary power. Qin Guo naturally knew this person. He was Shangguan Lan's uncle, the famous General White Horse, Shangguan Shao. Things are getting interesting now. Qin Guo felt an inexplicable sense of joy. He took joy in the misfortune of others, but in the blink of an eye, his smile disappeared. What do you mean? Chu Yang's voice was very harsh, and it was not the tone of a junior talking to an elder. It was very aggressive. Don't you already understand? Shangguan Shao looked coldly at Chu Yang and said, If you want to enter this door, you have to defeat me first. Otherwise, don't even think about it. I am not qualified to enter Duke Jiu's residence, and I am not qualified to marry Shangguan Lan. Shangguan Shao, is this what you mean? Chu Yang's expression became more and more angry, and his tone became colder and colder, but only he knew what was going on in his heart. Shangguan Shao was the first obstacle, and when he faced Shangguan Shao at this moment, he felt that Shangguan Shao was very familiar. He naturally knew the reason. In the 9 reincarnations, because of his continuous attempts, this scene had appeared at least 3 times. Therefore, he was too familiar with everything. He even knew what Shangguan Shao was going to say and what kind of subtle expressions and movements he would make. If you understand it this way, then do as you please. I understand. Chu Yang certainly understood very well. This node was very important. If it was lost, the consequences would be unimaginable. His mind was rapidly pondering and deducing. What kind of impact would the appearance of Kong Jingshi and Qin Guo have on him? The appearance of the two of them makes what I'm about to do even more logical. In the final confirmation, Chu Yang did not find any unfavorable factors, so he immediately carried out what he had thought before. After that, he directly bit open his finger, and this immediately caused everyone to be greatly surprised, and they thought that he was about to make a move. But then, everyone saw that he used his hand as a pen, blood as ink, and the void as paper, and directly wrote in the void. When the first 2 words came out, everyone's eyes immediately widened like copper bells. Divorce. Chu Yang wanted to divorce his wife. He actually wanted to divorce Shangguan Lan directly. Unbelievable, this was too unbelievable. Therefore, no one could be sure of such a situation, so they were even more focused, staring at Chu Yang's every move. Chu Yang wrote very quickly in the void. A letter of divorce silently appeared in the void. Then, it quickly enlarged so that everyone could see it. At the same time, his voice also rang out at this time. What he said was generally about the reason for the divorce. His words were mixed with his great anger and even accusation. This was really a divorce letter, a declaration of divorce. Chu Yang had really divorced Shangguan Lan. Swoosh. Almost at the same time, Chu Yang's voice fell, and he disappeared without a trace in an instant. Only the bloody words were branded in the air. Shangguan Shao was stunned. Kong Jingshi was stunned. Qin Guo was also stunned. Shangguan Can, Huang Fuxian, Xie Xiubua, Wang Lingyun, the 6 great young masters of Taijing City, Rui Zi, and the others were all stunned at this moment. They never thought that Chu Yang would divorce Shangguan Lan under the watchful eyes of the public. Chu Yang, this bastard, actually divorced Shangguan Lan. Chapter 26:12. Oh my God, is this true? What's going on? The god of pits actually divorced the divine fragrance talent. It must be an illusion. That's the divine fragrance talent. Who would be willing to divorce her? If he did that, that person must be a fool, a super fool. Unbelievable, this is unbelievable. Chu Yang actually divorced the divine fragrance talent. It was unknown when, but the sound of people suddenly rose from the crowd. It was like a torrential downpour. In an instant the sky turned dark. The whole world was raining, and the sound of rain could be heard everywhere. Soon, the heavy rain seemed to have caused a flood. The noise of the giants was like a surging torrent. I don't understand. I really don't understand. Why did the god of pits divorce the divine fragrance talent? This doesn't make sense. Why did he suddenly divorce the divine fragrance talent? That's the divine fragrance talent we're talking about. Who said he wasn't? But Chu Yang really did divorce the divine fragrance talented girl right in front of us. Could it be that the god of pits has a hole in his head? After the great shock, many people tried to find a reasonable explanation, but none of them could find a reasonable reason. Shangguan Shao himself couldn't find a reason. Until now, he still didn't understand why Chu Yang suddenly did such a thing. Before this, Chu Yang could do almost anything for Shangguan Lan. He wasn't afraid of any enemy. But suddenly Chu Yang gave up. To be honest, Shangguan Shao was completely dumbfounded. He admitted that he didn't like Chu Yang a little. He did want to make things difficult for Chu Yang. But this didn't seem to be a reason for Chu Yang to give up on Shangguan Lan. As Shangguan Lan's relative, Shangguan Can was also dumbfounded. He couldn't understand at all. Chu Yang had passed through so many difficulties and obstacles. Why did he suddenly give up when he was about to succeed? His uncle Shangguan Shao was a great emperor. Was he too strong? Bullshit. According to Chu Yang's bullshit strength, his comprehension and mastery of the Confucian Tao epoch was so astonishing that even Qin Guo was far inferior to him. If that bullshit Chu Yang fought with his uncle would most likely be beaten into a pile of shit. The great emperor's cultivation was strong, but the great era's inheritance was even stronger. Shangguan Can was very clear about this. Then why is that? Kong Jingshi and Qin Guo had the same mentality as Shangguan Can. The two of them had never thought that Chu Yang would actually make such a shocking move. The two of them couldn't figure out the reason behind it. What's so great about Ninth Duke's residence? Is Shangguan Lan made of gold? All of a sudden, two very hot-tempered voices rang out, immediately attracting the gazes of Shangguan Shao, Shangguan Can, Kong Jingshi, Qin Guo, and the rest of the people. With a swoosh, countless gazes converged on the speaker. The speaker couldn't help but shudder uncontrollably. At this moment, he seemed to finally understand what it was like to be the center of attention. It didn't seem to be an easy thing. Normally, the god of pits would be able to deal with it so calmly. He even did all kinds of things, and all kinds of nonsense. He was really a super bluff. Everyone. He immediately put on a stiff smile and imitated Chu Yang. He cupped his fist and said to everyone, "Everyone, please don't misunderstand. This marshal, no, this scum was just boldly guessing what Chu Hang was thinking. I couldn't help but blurt it out, causing everyone to misunderstand. I'm very afraid." Chapter 26:13. What's there to be afraid of? Let me tell you, based on what you've just said, if you don't give a reasonable explanation, you'll be beaten to death in a while. You'll have to end your fear immediately. That's right. Is Shangguan Lan made of gold? How dare you say something like that? You won't even know how you died later. You won't even know how you died. I think you'll at least beg for death. You're on your own now. The voices drowned out the man, and he was almost scared out of his wits. Cold sweat soaked his entire body. His lips trembled as he said, "Everyone, I'm just guessing. What is the god of pits thinking? What is the god of pits thinking? Tell us." "That's right. Tell us." The noise was so loud that it was like a flood. It came from all directions, and the spittle was like splashing waves. When the man saw this, he immediately knew that he was cornered. He simply threw caution to the wind. "Everyone, since you want to hear it, I'll tell you." After a pause, he imitated someone's tone and said, "Everyone, think about it. Where did the god of pits come from? The eastern wilderness. That's right. It's the eastern wilderness." He continued, "Between the eastern wilderness and Zhongzhou, is there the East Continent? The East Continent and the eastern wilderness are worlds apart, and Zhongzhou and the East Continent are worlds apart. Therefore, you can roughly imagine, if you came from the eastern wilderness and went straight to Zhongzhou, how many difficulties and obstacles would you encounter? How much sadness would you encounter?" Whoosh! As soon as this was said, the whole place fell silent. Many people then thought about it and immediately made a lot of connections in their mind. The eastern wilderness was too weak. From the eastern wilderness to the East Continent and then to Zhongzhou there was a huge gap between two worlds. The things that one had to face in between could be roughly imagined. Of course, Chu Yang was a genius, so things would be much easier. However, many people understood and felt from their own perspective, because they felt that this was simply too difficult. There was a huge gap between Taijing City and Jindu. Although they were from Taijing City, it was difficult for them to establish themselves in Jindu. "Let's not talk about this for now," that person continued. "In the Sage Monarch Academy, he broke through the 18 stages of the Path of Strange Gates and killed a saint. In a short time, he comprehended the state of Confucianism and the state of immortality. Furthermore, the 5 experts of the Sage Monarch Academy fought to teach him so many things. How shocking! He should be qualified, right? If that's not enough, that King Shen won first place in both the written and martial examinations. Then he should be qualified, right? Furthermore, even if this doesn't count, on the way here, the god of traps defeated Kong Jingshi and Qin Guo. This time, he should be qualified, right? These 3 questions shocked many people. The Divine Fragrance Girl was amazing, but a person like Chu Yang who had such an amazing performance was not qualified? Was he not worthy of the Divine Fragrance Girl? Even if he was not worthy of marrying the Divine Fragrance Girl, he should be qualified to enter Duke Jiu's residence, right? However, he had even entered Duke Jiu's residence. What did this mean? How could he not be angry? How could he not go berserk? Shangguan Shao had gone too far. Duke Jiu's residence had gone too far. Chu Yang could not bear it anymore. Naturally, he did not need to endure anymore. Therefore, he did not need to endure anymore. Therefore, he completely exploded. Chapter 26:15. In this, the key was still the person. If it was someone else, he might not be like this, but Chu Yang was different. How could such an arrogant and unruly person bear the humiliation of Duke Jiu's mansion again and again? The god of fraud is indeed the god of fraud. So what if she is the divine fragrance talented lady? There are plenty of fish in the sea. There is only one divine fragrance talented lady in this world. Is there only one divine fragrance talented lady? A real man does not have to worry about not having a wife. The god of fraud is indeed a man with ambition. This time, I really admire him from the bottom of my heart. I have to admire him. Everyone says that the divine fragrance talented lady is so and so, but only the god of fraud can see it clearly and understand it. What he wants to marry is a woman, a wife, not just a beauty, and definitely not an ancestor. No matter how beautiful a woman is, there will come a day when her beauty will decline. She will become a faded flower tomorrow. Even one day, she will become a pile of bones. Listening to the many voices, Shangguan Shao was even more dumbfounded. As people had just said, Chu Yang had indeed proven himself, and he had proven himself time and time again, but he still refused to let it go. What did he rely on to be like this? Did he really think that Chu Yang would only marry Shangguanlan? Did he really think that Chu Yang would be unable to extricate himself from Shangguanlan? Did he really think that Chu Yang would not be able to live without Shangguanlan? None of these were true. Shangguanshao knew clearly in his heart that there was an extremely crucial reason for his actions. He was biased against Chu Yang. He had always looked down on Chu Yang. This time, Chu Yang's actions could be said to be a slap to his face. Kong Jingshi and Qin Gua suddenly looked at each other in the huge noise. Then, they could not help but smile bitterly. Did they really have to marry Shangguanlan? Why did they treat themselves as dog fart or even less than dog fart because of a mere Shangguanlan? No wonder Shangguanlan looked down on them. They all treated themselves as dog fart. How could Shangguanlan like them? They are really not as good as that thing. I feel a little ashamed of my inferiority. Not only in literary arts but also in martial arts and even in the field of women? If they were Chu Yang, they probably wouldn't be able to do such a thing as divorcing Shangguanlan because they absolutely couldn't bear to do it. Whoosh whoosh. The two of them sighed in their hearts for a while before leaving. At this moment, they didn't know why, but Shangguanlan's attractiveness to them suddenly fell to the bottom. Perhaps it was because even a person like Chu Yang couldn't get her approval, so the two of them probably couldn't either. So, they completely gave up. Ruizi also left. Everything that had happened today had given him a deeper understanding of Chu Yang. Huang Fuxian, Xie Xiaobua, Wang Lingyun, and the rest of the 6 great young masters of Taijing City suddenly became dispirited. After Kong Jingshi and Qin Gua left, they also quickly left. Because of Kong Jingshi, Qin Gua, and the rest, even more people left. However, most of them left while discussing. In front of Duke Zhou's residence, the crowd that was initially packed with people had dispersed in an instant, leaving behind a large empty space. Only 2 people were still standing there, Shangguanshao and Shangguancan. At this moment, Shangguanshao and Shangguancan were still in a daze. They simply didn't know that a great danger was surging towards them. If they weren't careful, they would die without a burial ground. The news naturally spread quickly throughout Taijing City. At first, the entire Taijing City fell into a great shock. It could be said that the entire Taijing City was stunned. Chu Yang divorced the divine fragrance genius. How was this possible? The people of Taijing City were also in disbelief. Then, there was an uproar. Almost the entire Taijing City was discussing this matter. The reason for this was because the reputation of the divine fragrance genius Shangguanlan was too great. As people learned more and more details of the matter, after their shock and astonishment, many people sighed endlessly. It seemed that they were sighing for Chu Yang, but they were also sighing for themselves. Even a person like Chu Yang wasn't qualified to marry Shangguanlan, let alone them. Chapter 26:16. In Jindu, news of Chu Yang divorcing Shangguanlan would naturally arrive later. However, for some people, this did not exist. For example, the first prince, Huang Fuwuji. The first prince's residence. A study, an incomparably huge and luxurious study. At this moment, in front of the first prince, Huang Fuwuji, stood 2 neat rows of burly men. Each of them was like a god. They were all about the same height, and their faces were almost covered with curly beard. They were all dressed in white, and they all had a foot-wide leather belt tied around their waist. A silver scabbard with a black hilt was also inserted diagonally into the belt. The scabbard did not move, but the hands holding the scabbard moved. Each of them held a piece of paper in their hand. It was written in black and white. The paper was very soft, but at this moment, it was as straight as a white wooden plaque. Huang Fuwuji was lying on a recliner, and the folding fan in his hand was lightly tapping as he looked at the first row of black and white words on the white paper. Tasting spring tea, 3 sips of plain water. Kong Jingshi's first couplet was written on the first piece of paper. Huang Fuwuji glanced at it and could not immediately tell that it was a split couplet. He could not immediately match it. He immediately said coldly, "This Chu Yang really deserves to die." He was not as good as Chu Yang. Chu Yang naturally deserved to die. Show me the answer. As soon as he finished speaking, the person in front stepped back and the person behind took a step forward. The contents of the paper were imprinted in his eyes. Zhu Xian Nunnery, 2 mountain men. Huang Fu Wuji's expression turned even uglier. This match was simply too perfect. Moreover, that lowlife was matched up in an instant. This made him feel very uncomfortable in his heart, because the one who had such literary talent should be him. The lotus seed's heart is bitter. He looked at the next couplet. After successfully matching it, he compared it to Chu Yang's couplet, "Lier's stomach is bitter." His face was as black as the bottom of a pot. This was especially so when he realized that he had noticed that it was a homophonic couplet. He only matched the first meaning. Hai shui zhao 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 luo. Due to his anger, Huang Fu Wuji read even faster. When he saw this couplet, he couldn't help but exclaim, "Kong Jingshi's couplet isn't just a little tricky." All of a sudden, his competitive spirit rose again. He did not immediately look at the couplet Chu Yang had given him. Instead, he began to ponder over it. However, when he excitedly matched his couplet and compared it with Chu Yang's couplet, the fan in his hand silently turned into powder. A few floors, supporting the eastern peak alone, unifying the distant mountains near the water, providing a painting, gathering the snow on the mountain ridge, scattering the white river smoke. Such a long couplet made him realize once again that compared to Chu Yang, he was nothing more than a dog fart. My superior awe-inspiring might reveal the courage of a tiger. You despicable bastard! Show half of your head. As such, when he saw Kong Jingshi and Chu Yang's couplet, although Huang Fu Wuji became more and more jealous of Chu Yang, he couldn't help but exclaim in delight. He was jealous of Chu Yang, but he definitely did not like Chu Yang. This was because Kong Jingshi's literary talent was also higher than his. Moreover, because he was repeatedly stumped by Kong Jingshi's couplets, Chu Yang suddenly came up with such a vulgar couplet. He felt very relieved. Plant a tree in your house, use your bathtub with fish. Good. When the fish is ripe, enter my stomach. Your mother will personally cook. Ha! When he saw this, he couldn't help but laugh loudly again. Ugly. Kong Jingshi is about to faint from anger. It would be difficult for him to not be angered to death. Huang Fu Wuji was laughing happily. However, the smile on his face suddenly disappeared. He became extremely sinister. Kong Jingshi's literary talent is not as good as that bastard. I'm not as good as him. This is really good. Chapter 26:18. Master, the latest news, Chu Yang divorced Shangguan Lan. At this moment, the scholarly middle-aged man beside Huang Fu Wuji dashed in from the outside and reported the news to his master as fast as he could. Huang Fu Wuji was stunned when he heard the news. Then he looked at the middle-aged man and said in surprise, "What did you say? That bastard divorced Shangguan Lan?" He was very surprised because in his script, there was no such situation. Yes, master. The elegant middle-aged man was very alert. He immediately explained the situation. Then the surprise on Huang Fu Wuji's face disappeared, and he fell into silence. This lowlife is not just arrogant, Yi Futian said. After a while, he turned to the scholarly middle-aged man and smiled strangely. He suddenly asked, "Why do you think Duke Jiao is doing everything he can to stop me? Isn't it strange?" Master, I don't know. The elegant middle-aged man wouldn't say anything to such a lunatic even if he knew. Luckily, Huang Fu Wuji did not expect him to answer at all. He only smiled weirdly and said, "Things are getting more and more interesting. I'm very interested. So, remember to report to me as soon as you find out anything about this." "Yes, master." The elegant middle-aged man escaped again, and couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. Huang Fu Wuji was the person that Chu Yang cared about the most in this matter. And there was another person who cared about this very much, Shangguan Lan. After learning about Chu Yang's actions, Shangguan Lan didn't look sad. Instead, her beautiful eyes lit up and she couldn't help but ask, "Brother Yang, are you still going to do this?" She seemed to have expected that Chu Yang would do this. Of course, she knew very well what effect this would have. Duke Jiu and the others tried their best to stop her from marrying Chu Yang. Naturally, they would be loyal and their danger would be reduced. Therefore, her danger would be reduced to the minimum. Shangguan Lan wasn't just guessing. In Chu Yang's 9 reincarnations, he had tried this once and the result was like this. The other result was that Chu Yang would become a mouse in the eyes of the first prince, the Jin Emperor. The first prince kept playing with the mouse, and Chu Yang kept enduring until he felt that he had accumulated enough strength. He took the initiative to kill the first prince and lure the Jin Emperor into a great battle. Chu Yang was amazing. Although he didn't kill the Jin Emperor, he successfully escaped. The Jin Emperor madly chased after Chu Yang in the heavenly spirit world and the gods' world, but in the end, he still lost track of Chu Yang. Because of the huge threat Chu Yang posed, the Jin Emperor didn't want to leave such a hidden danger. He used Shangguan Lan as bait to force Chu Yang to appear, which led to Chu Yang being killed by the Jin Emperor. In this reincarnation, Shangguan Lan clearly knew that she was Chu Yang's fatal weakness. Because Chu Yang couldn't tolerate her being trampled on by the Jin Emperor. Chu Yang's family and friends were his weak spots. But because the Jin Emperor didn't notice them at the beginning, Chu Yang successfully moved and hid them. As for hiding Shangguan Lan, it was impossible because the Jin Emperor had been watching her. Shangguan Lan recalled every detail of Chu Yang's reincarnation. Many thoughts flashed through her mind. In the end, she anxiously stopped at one point. She was worried that those in the destiny would greatly affect Chu Yang's plan. For example, she wasn't in the destiny. Chapter 26:19. Because of her contemplation, the elegant courtyard where Shangguan Lan was in was completely quiet. Parrot and Xiaoguai had been sent away by her 6 days ago. Otherwise, it would be more lively at this time. Unfortunately, she only had Shangguan Mei by her side at this moment. After a while, the rapid sound of a pipa suddenly sounded in the silence. Shangguan Lan suddenly played the pipa, and it was ambush from 10 sides. Strong enough to pick up mountains, unparalleled in the world, unfavorable times but not dead. What can I do if not dead? What can I do if not dead? Farewell my concubine, what can I do? She and Chu Yang were so similar. Facing the Jin Emperor, they were surrounded by enemies from all sides and had no chance of survival. The reason why she thought of this was more important because of Chu Yang. The Jin Emperor set a trap for her. Chu Yang appeared and claimed to be the Overlord Chu. Even if he was surrounded by enemies, he would still scare the Jin Emperor. In that reincarnation, she remembered every detail of that scene very clearly. She especially remembered that when Chu Yang was defeated and was about to die, he was narcissistic and boastful. He was a hero in life and a hero in death. Until now, she still remembered Chu Yang, unwilling to abandon a beauty. Because, in that life, this was a rare smile on Chu Yang's face. It was rare that he was not serious. It seemed that when he was about to die, she was already by his side, although she was already a dead person at that time. Farewell my concubine, Brother Yang will never let you feel it again. Shangguan Lan brushed the hair on her forehead. She did not look determined, but suddenly smiled gently, which suddenly made the world lose its color. In that life, in that battle, if she hadn't been a burden, Chu Yang definitely wouldn't have lost, let alone died. Perhaps the fierce battle between Chu Yang and the Jin Emperor would last for a very long time, but she firmly believed that Chu Yang would win in the end. She even thought that if not for her, Chu Yang would not come out and wait for a good opportunity, and the Jin Emperor would die faster and more miserably. As for how miserably, when Shangguan Lan thought of this, she suddenly couldn't help but laugh, and then she muttered to herself, according to Brother Yang's character, it will definitely be very interesting. She was 100% sure that the Jin Emperor was absolutely miserable beyond words. Shangguan Mei, who was at the side, naturally noticed her young Miss's abnormality. What was even more strange was that when Chu Yang divorced her young Miss, not only did her young Miss not resent him, but she was even more infatuated with that bastard, unable to extricate herself. What she didn't understand was what her young Miss was thinking. Sometimes it was as if he had lost his soul. Sometimes he would suddenly laugh. It was as if he was laughing and crying at the same time. Especially the sorrow that he revealed, it really made her anxious. Miss, as soon as she opened her mouth, she was immediately interrupted by Shangguan Lan. Mayor, you have to take good care of yourself in the future. As she spoke, Shangguan Lan suddenly realized something and immediately stopped talking. Miss, what are you talking about? Shangguan Mei inexplicably panicked, and she became abnormally anxious. Mayor. Shangguan Lan smiled sweetly and comforted her. Mayor, when I first heard that Brother Yang divorced me, I lost my soul and became a mess. You don't have to worry too much. But this matter can't always be delayed. If I don't ask Brother Yang, I will feel uneasy. Mayor, I will be back soon. As she spoke, she left without a care in the world and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Shangguan Mei was stupefied there, but she became more and more uneasy and anxious. Suddenly she thought of the parrot and Xiao Guai. She couldn't help but be shocked and exclaimed, "No, Miss must be going to do something. Why did Miss send the parrot and Xiao Guai away in advance? Did Miss know everything in advance? That's impossible. What happened? Miss, what are you going to do?" Chapter 26-20. When Shangguan Mei found Duke Jiu, Shangguan Lan had already disappeared. Then, Duke Jiu's mansion immediately fell into great chaos. The news of Shangguan Lan's disappearance spread like wildfire. Soon, Taijing City was in an uproar. Caught off guard. Shangguan Lan's sudden disappearance caught Duke Jiu's mansion off guard. The people in Taijing City were also caught off guard. Shangguan Lan disappeared just like that. No matter how hard they tried to find her, they couldn't find her. It was as if such a big living person had completely disappeared from the world. There was no trace of her. She disappeared cleanly without leaving any trace. Naturally, there were many discussions about this matter. Some people thought that Shangguan Lan was dead. Some people thought that Chu Yang abducted Shangguan Lan. Some people said that Shangguan Lan was forcing Duke Jiu and the others. It seemed that every opinion was very logical and reasonable. However, no one in Duke Jiu's family could understand, because Shangguan Lan was definitely not such a person. In the chaos, only Duke Jiu faintly sensed something from Chu Yang and Shangguan Lan's actions. However, he didn't dare to think deeper. He had to think deeper. However, when he thought of this, he fell into boundless fear. His entire body was almost frozen. In the end, he thought of Chu Yang and Shangguan Lan's purpose. His heart was instantly so warm that it almost melted into water. Therefore, he only hoped that his guess was wrong and that such a terrible thing would never happen. He seemed to have a reason. No one would know such a top-secret matter. At this time, no one knew the whereabouts of Shangguan Lan. However, there was one person who knew: a ghost. A ghost was naturally not a real ghost. However, it was a ghost arranged by the first prince to be by Shangguan Lan's side. She didn't know whether it was tall or short, old or young, male or female. The only thing that could be confirmed was that ghosts were very shocking, very shocking. As long as a ghost didn't want others to know of its existence, no one would know. Ghosts were actually defined like this. The great emperor was a human and he was a ghost. Humans naturally couldn't see ghosts, so the great emperor naturally couldn't see this ghost. The reason why Shangguanlan knew about ghosts was naturally through Chu Yang's 9 reincarnations. Because of this, Shangguanlan had once rejoiced. Fortunately, she had discovered the existence of the ghost in time during Chu Yang's first reincarnation. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. Because the ghost was by her side, the ghost knew her every move. Therefore, the ghost could even find out about the shocking things that Chu Yang had experienced from her. However, although she had known about the existence of ghosts in advance and had restrained herself greatly during the process of experiencing Chu Yang's 9 reincarnations, she was still worried that she would expose a great secret. Therefore, ghosts had to die. Ghosts had to die, but how did they die? How was she going to die in such a way that Chu Yang would feel the least guilty and implicate the people she loved the least? Huang Fu Wuji, the avatar of the tyrannical ruler of the myriad gods world and the heavenly soul world, was like a psychopath because of his supreme power. What kind of reaction would he have if she died? Shangguanlan thought about many things, but in the end, she still cared about Chu Yang's feelings the most. As for what Huang Fu Wuji thought, she was too lazy to even think about it. Whatever he wanted, this psychopath would act up anyway. Therefore, after she left Duke Jiu's residence, she had a beautiful smile on her face, a beautiful smile. When she smiled, it was as if the entire world smiled. Not only was it indescribably beautiful, it was also indescribably happy. That kind of smile, even the ghost in the dark, was no stranger to her smile that made the world pale in comparison. However, at this moment, it was as if it had lost its soul. It lost all thoughts in its mind and was completely stunned. Chapter 26-21. Shangguanlan, who had been flying at high speed, suddenly flew to an area where the void suddenly collapsed and turned into a huge black hole in an instant. As soon as the black hole appeared, it swallowed everything. Shangguanlan was caught off guard and rushed into it. She was directly swallowed by the black hole without even making a sound. She completely disappeared without a trace. At this moment, Gui Kai suddenly jolted and woke up in fright. Then, he was immediately horrified. The huge black hole was about to swallow him. No! The ghost struggled with all his might, but no matter what he did, it was to no avail. What was even more inconceivable was that he actually screamed in panic. He could die, but he absolutely couldn't scream. At his level, who could make him scream? Alas, he screamed uncontrollably as if he was about to be bitten to death by a ferocious tiger. "Master, save me!" In the end, he asked his master for help, but it wasn't the first prince but the Jin Emperor. Only the Emperor could hear his screams and sense his danger. Only the Emperor had the ability to save him. The first prince was only a clone of the Emperor and didn't have the power to do so. Great Tomb! A voice came out of nowhere. It was a strange voice. Even though it was emotionless like the voice of the Heaven Duke, it was filled with horror at this moment. The world was heartless and treated all beings as dogs. The Heaven Duke was emotionless, but now, he was frightened to the extreme. This so-called Great Tomb was absolutely frightening. Why is the epic tomb connected to this place? When was this hole formed? The Heaven Duke's voice murmured. He didn't do anything, but Gui was rescued. However, only half of his body was left. Even the Emperor couldn't save him completely. As for Gui, he was just a ghost without a physical body. Half of his body floated around like a ghost. When he heard the words, Great Tomb, especially the epic tomb, he was scared out of his wit. He finally understood why someone like him was so frightened and even screamed. It was because this was the Great Tomb of the epic. A resting place after the end of the era. To be exact, the tomb was the end of all epic. Not to mention him, even the Jin Emperor wouldn't be able to survive after being sucked in. Shangguanlan knows that there is a Great Tomb here. She wants to use the Great Tomb to kill me? Such a question immediately popped up in the ghost's mind. If Shangguan Mei could detect Shangguan Lan's abnormality, how could he not? Of course, he also knew the secret identities of Chu Yang and Shangguan Lan. Otherwise, how could he be so sensitive? Unfortunately, what he didn't know was that if it weren't for him, Shangguan Lan wouldn't even have the chance to say goodbye to the person closest to her. As expected, there is more than one place, and there is no pattern to it, and it is randomly generated. Heaven Duke's voice rang out again. Ghost was shocked again and immediately threw all questions related to Shangguan Lan to the back of his mind. Compared to the Great Tomb, Shangguan Lan's matter was not a matter at all. Deformities will eventually die prematurely and won't last long. Looks like I can't delay any longer. This was the Jin Emperor's last words. His voice then completely disappeared. As for Shangguan Lan's matter, he absolutely wouldn't care about such a trivial matter. Ghost also knew very well that he had to tell the first prince about Shangguan Lan's matter. Ghost also quickly disappeared. He absolutely didn't want to stay in this damned place for even half a second. Although this wasn't the real Great Tomb, it was only a passage. Chapter 26-22. Ghost didn't say anything else and didn't voice his suspicions either. The reason was very simple: the Jin Emperor. According to the Jin Emperor's judgment, the entrance to the tomb appeared randomly. If he didn't know, how could Shangguan Lan know? Thus, this could only be a coincidence. When the Crown Prince Huangfu Wuji learned that Shangguan Lan had been devoured by the great necropolis, he flew into a rage. The news quickly spread and more people learned about it. Eventually, it was no longer a secret. Sunset. When the sun was at its reddest, Chu Yang left Taijing City and stayed in a small temple by the river. He looked listlessly at the lonely green hills, the surging river, the winding paths, and the splash ink-like moss stains. In the end, his gaze fell to his feet. He stared blankly at his feet, which were illuminated by the setting sun. His mind was in a trance. He did not know what he was doing, nor did he know what he was thinking. Of course, he also heard the news of Shangguan Lan's death. He wanted to laugh it off because it was impossible. This had never happened before in the 9 reincarnations. However, he didn't know why he felt so uneasy. Especially when the sunset was at its reddest, it meant that the sun was about to set. The day was about to end, and the night was about to fall. What about the person? Did Shangguan Lan really sink like the setting sun? Chu Yang didn't want to go, but he couldn't help but think about it. Because that was Shangguan Lan, the woman he liked, and because it involved the Great Tomb. Of course, he knew about the tomb because it could be considered his comrade against the Jin Emperor. During the 9 reincarnations, Li Chia was able to kill the Jin Emperor because he was distracted by the tomb. However, he didn't know much about this comrade. He only knew that the great necropolis was the final destination of everything, but he didn't know the specifics. He didn't even know how the tomb restrained the Jin Emperor and what kind of effect it had on him. Moreover, the tomb appeared earlier than expected. In other words, fate has changed again. Chu Yang finally knew the reason for his uneasiness and fear. If fate had changed, then the woman he loved might really be dead. But how could this be? Why did something that didn't happen? He couldn't find the reason, but soon, he shuddered as if he had been struck by lightning. Lan isn't in fate either. If Shangguan Lan was also not part of fate, then the 9 lives of the 9 lives of reincarnation would naturally deviate greatly. Swish! Chu Yang's face turned as pale as paper. It was as if all the bones in his body had been pulled out. He suddenly had no support and didn't know what to do. Not only did he lose his support, but he also thought of an even more terrifying possibility. The Jin Emperor might not be in fate at all. In this way, his so-called future, when he came into contact with the reincarnation cycle, was nothing more than his own entertainment. It was nothing more than a big joke, and even less bullshit. However, He was actually stupid enough to only discover such a huge flaw now, causing him to almost fall into a state of eternal damnation. Am I a pig? He didn't even blame himself for wasting time. He just cursed and began to think about everything. Soon, he was the first to confirm a few points. First, the Gene Emperor shouldn't be in fate. The 9 reincarnations were much less useful in predicting the future. The Gene Emperor should be more terrifying than he imagined. Secondly, everything had to be reconsidered. Everything had to be redone. Finally, and most importantly, he had to confirm if the Great Tomb had really appeared. To be more precise, was Shangguan Lan really dead? Shangguan Lan's life was the most important thing. Nothing else mattered. I don't know, but someone will tell me. Swish. Chapter 26-23. The news of the tomb came from Huangfu Wuji. The news of Shangguan Lan being swallowed by the tomb and dying in it also came from Huangfu Wuji. In the end, everything converged on Huangfu Wuji, so the solution to the problem naturally lay with Huangfu Wuji. He didn't need to look for Huangfu Wuji. If Shangguan Lan was really dead, then Huangfu Wuji would definitely come looking for him. As for the reason, it was very simple. If Shangguan Lan was dead, how could he still be alive? Therefore, Chu Yang only wanted to find the tomb that swallowed Shangguan Lan. The search for the tomb was much easier than he thought because there were many people who wanted to confirm Shangguan Lan's life and death. And to confirm Shangguan Lan's life and death, the prerequisite was whether the tomb really existed. With so many people wanting to confirm this, things naturally became much easier. However, things became easier, but Chu Yang's heart completely sank. Not only did the tomb really appear, but it was also constantly evolving and growing, so that soon everyone could see it. The tomb was not very far from Taijing City, so it could be seen from afar. In the west of Taijing City, there seemed to be a giant beast opening its ferocious mouth, constantly swallowing everything in the world, causing the whole world to become dark and even caused a great panic, which caused Shangguan Lan's death to fade away very quickly. Chu Yang had no interest in such a big event. He had no interest in the possibility of the world being destroyed. After confirming that the tomb had appeared, he still couldn't believe it, so he sneaked into Duke Jiu's residence. By the time he snuck out of Duke Jiu's residence, he had completely lost interest in everything and was running toward the tomb in a daze. The tomb represented death, disaster, destruction, and end. Everyone's expression changed when they talked about it, but he couldn't wait to rush over. There was no one in this direction, and there was no living creature. Along the way, in the direction of the tomb, the gray color became more and more obvious, and the airflow became more and more obvious. The airflow from all directions was heading towards the tomb. Huff huff, Chu Yang continued to move forward. He was still very far away from the great tomb, but the airflow had already turned into a whistling gale. After entering such an area, the vegetation had already withered and died. Even the slightest touch would turn them into flying ash. At this time, Chu Yang also clearly felt that the life energy in his body was constantly being sucked away. He was familiar with this feeling, so he was able to deal with it calmly. After he madly dashed forward for a while, the wind disappeared, the airflow disappeared, and the light became extremely dim. The whole world had turned into a deathly gray. Everything was deathly gray. He even felt that the ground under his feet seemed to have turned into deathly gray dust. He felt as if he would immediately sink if he stepped on it. After that, Chu Yang found himself in a completely gray world, and everything in it seemed to have turned gray dust. Even he seemed to have turned into gray dust, floating in the air. Clang! Chu Yang felt that the devouring power coming from the front had suddenly increased by another level. It had become incomparably huge. He almost couldn't control his body and was about to be devoured. Finally, he had no choice but to stop and stare blankly at the front. He stared at the huge black hole. Chapter 26-24. The world was deathly silent. Chu Yang was in a daze amidst the endless gray. He slowly became mysterious and gloomy. Soon, he didn't look like a living person with flesh and blood. Instead, he looked like a ghost or a transformed form of gray dust. His eyes were fixated on the tomb in front of him. Suddenly, he felt that the soft gray dust was cold, hard, and extremely ferocious, like giant mouths ready to eat people. At this moment, his heart seemed to be cold, hard, and ferocious because this was the only way to prevent himself from being devoured by these ferocious mouths. However, he felt that he didn't seem to be aware of human sorrow. It was as if he had never loved anyone in his life, never had any relatives or friends, let alone enemies. It was as if he had never had anything, not even himself. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 7 days passed in the blink of an eye. Chu Yang was frozen in place. During these 7 days and nights, he frantically thought about how to deal with the Jin Emperor, not daring to give himself the slightest chance to think about anything else. He was doing his best to avoid something. During these 7 days, the world didn't get any worse. The devouring power of the tomb was rapidly weakening. It was clear that the Jin Emperor had taken action. On the 8th day, this part of the world became even better. Sunlight could once again casually shine in, dispelling the deathly gray color of this place. At the same time, apart from sunshine, another person had finally arrived. This person had a majestic figure and a majestic appearance, as aloof as a mountain. His cold eyes shot out starlight while his curved brows were painted. He stepped forward like a demon lord descending from the heavens, the Taisui god of the mortal world. He seemed to be smiling yet not smiling, and seemed to be angry yet not angry. His starry eyes fell on Chu Yang's body. When he saw that Chu Yang's body was petrified and didn't move for a long time, the corners of his mouth finally raised into a happy smile. "He's here." Chu Yang didn't look back, but he already knew who it was. "You know who I am? You knew that I would come?" The smile on that person's face disappeared in an instant. That half smile, half anger, and half anger instantly became clear. In an instant, it seemed as if he couldn't wait to pounce on Chu Yang and eat him alive bit by bit. Other than that, he was also surprised. Chu Yang knew of him and knew that he would definitely come. He was extremely surprised. "Haha." Chu Yang didn't explain and only chuckled. However, this chuckle was very different from before. Although it was as mocking as before, it was now filled with endless gnashing of teeth and hatred. It was as if one could see a pair of scarlet eyes upon hearing this chuckle. The person who came saw such a pair of scarlet eyes. However, when Chu Yang turned around, Chu Yang's eyes were not scarlet at all. There was only contempt, indifference, and deathly stillness. He was surprised again. The newcomer was naturally Huang Fu Wuji, the Huang Fu Wuji that Chu Yang had been waiting for 7 days and 7 nights. "It seems that you know a lot about me. I'm very surprised." Facing Chu Yang's disrespect, Huang Fu Wuji was furious. The hatred in his eyes deepened and his gaze was like a poisonous sword. "There will be many surprises for you. For example, you will die here today." Chapter 26-25. "You want me to die here?" Huang Fu Wuji's expression suddenly turned ferocious and fierce. "Bastard, how dare you? You know who I am, so you should know what to do. Kneel down and cry right now and I'll let you die a quick death." "Huang Fu Wuji, how dare you play this game in front of me? Are you even a beginner?" Chu Yang sneered in disdain. "Who is the expert in mental illness? You should continue to be envious of me, understand? You're courting death." "Haha!" Huang Fu Wuji was furious and was about to attack. But Chu Yang suddenly burst into laughter, and he couldn't help but stop. "Huang Fu Wuji," Chu Yang sneered, I'm crazy, I'm reckless, I'm a game, and so on. How am I compared to you? You may look like me, but you're just playing a game while I'm living my life. The difference between heaven and earth is like heaven and earth. Yours is just a joke. Huang Fu Wuji was the Jin Emperor's avatar, the highest ruler in both the heavenly spirit world and the gods' world. What could he play? He could only die of loneliness and boredom because he was invincible. It was too easy for him to get anything he wanted. Bastard, your understanding of me is far beyond my imagination. You've surprised me again. Huang Fu Wuji was flabbergasted once again, and felt even more confused. The despicable person in front of him seemed to be himself and knew everything about him very well. Of course, what the other party said was not wrong at all. He had once compared the way the two of them did things. Chu Yang also did things according to his own preferences, but the results were completely different. Because he did not have the weight of life, it was just a game. Naturally, it was boring, and of course, it would definitely not be exciting. This was caused by status. Therefore, he was not only envious of Chu Yang, he was jealous of him to death. To be exact, this was what he couldn't tolerate the most about Chu Yang. Chu Yang didn't have supreme status, so how could he live so freely? Accident? Now is not the time to talk about accidents. Chu Yang stared at Huang Fu Wuji as though he was looking at a dead man. He then pointed at Huang Fu Wuji and said, Lan Lan died because of you. I want you to die without a complete corpse. Impudent! How dare you blame me? What kind of status did Huang Fu Wuji have? Not only did Chu Yang look down on him, he even used his supreme status to declare him guilty. This was something he couldn't accept at all. However, Chu Yang's next sentence stunned him. Lan Lan, looks like you're really dead. With such a sentence, he heard too much information. That bastard was actually not sure that Shangguan Lan was dead until just now. He even had fantasies in his heart. After Huang Fu Wuji lost the first move, he naturally became even more furious. He couldn't help but want to capture Chu Yang and torture him to death. However, in the blink of an eye, he started to laugh coldly again. Bastard, if you didn't divorce Shangguan Lan, would Shangguan Lanqi have died? After a pause, he sneered even more and accused even more. Who are you blaming? You are the one who killed Shangguan Lan. You are the murderer. Crack. Chu Yang's body trembled, and his teeth made caw-caw sounds. He did make a wrong judgment. His foresight in the future led to this. If he wasn't so confident in everything he saw in the reincarnation, everything would be completely different. Ha! Seeing Chu Yang in pain, Huang Fu Wuji was very happy and laughed loudly. How could killing a person be compared to making this person suffer? He still felt that it was not enough. Bastard, as a man, you can't even protect the woman who loves you deeply. What kind of shit are you? You are just a piece of trash who only deserves to kneel at my feet and bark. How dare you be so arrogant in front of me? Chapter 26:26. Ha ha! In the face of Huang Fu Wuji's bitter mockery and sharp pain, Chu Yang suddenly laughed crazily in his grief and indignation. Especially when Shangguan Lan's voice and smile appeared in his mind, the tearing pain in his heart suddenly became boundless. When it was boundless and deep, he laughed crazily. In the end, he looked up to the sky and roared crazily, venting crazily. At this moment, his vocal cords were almost torn apart. That roar reverberated endlessly in this deathly gray world. Then, Chu Yang slowly calmed down, and even made Huang Fu Wuji stunned as he recited a poem. From tomorrow onwards, I will be a happy person. Feed the horses, chop firewood, and travel the world. From tomorrow onwards, I will care about food and vegetables. I have a house facing the sea, where the spring flowers bloom. What kind of bullshit poem is this? Feeding the horses and chopping firewood is a big deal, but travel the world my ass. Food and vegetables need to be cared about, but is it important to have a house? Facing the sea, where the spring flowers bloom. What is so special about it that it is worth your hoarse voice to emphasize it? Huang Fu Wuji felt that he was already temperamental, reckless, and lawless enough, so much so that he looked like a lunatic. However, he found that Chu Yang was even more temperamental and lunatic than him. At this time, he actually made such a mess. This had always been unique to him. He had always been the only one who was so crazy in front of others, doing things that were impossible. However, this unique thing of his was now snatched away by someone else. The most unbearable thing was that he found that Chu Yang was even more egotistical than him. He thought that he was the best in the world, and did not put anyone in his eyes. Huang Fu Wuji's starry eyes instantly turned cold, but when he heard Chu Yang's monologue again, he could not help but be stunned again. For a period of time, I don't understand why I keep criticizing myself, blaming myself, and even loathing and hating myself. Is it because I'm not good enough? But to me, the person who loves me the most should be myself. However, why have I become like this? Am I not satisfied with myself? But why am I not dissatisfied with myself? In the end, I sort of figured it out. Because I couldn't satisfy all of you, I was dissatisfied with myself. For example, Chu Yang smiled and pointed at Huang Fu Wuji. Take you for example. You said that I was trash and I couldn't refute that. It seems to be true. So from then on, I decided that I would never blame myself or hate myself anymore. But I haven't done something like this for a long time, so I'll do it to my heart's content today. Chu Yang, you are a piece of trash. Chu Yang, you #yen% are a coward. Huang Fu Wuji was dumbfounded. Ghost and the others who were following Huang Fu Wuji in the dark were also dumbfounded. Chu Yang's reasons seemed to be very strong and reasonable, but what he said seemed to be illogical. No one knew what he was talking about. Moreover, what was he doing? He was so crazy that even a lunatic would feel ashamed of himself and admit that he was inferior. Soon, Huang Fu Wuji, Ghost, and the others had completely different thoughts. Ghost and the others were extremely shocked. There was such a person in this world. What a weirdo! Huang Fu Wuji was extremely angry. Chu Yang was originally crazier than him, but now he was going to go one step further. This made his craziness seem even less frivolous, even more chaotic, and even more meaningless. To be exact, his craziness was true craziness. He was really a lunatic, while Chu Yang was really unrestrained and extremely carefree. Chapter 26-27. Huang Fu Wuji roared crazily, "Bastard! That's enough. I'm sorry for making you feel inferior and miserable. I'm very sorry." Chu Yang suddenly became a gentleman again and apologized politely. His words and actions were very elegant, but his voice became hoarse. Don't be too angry, because I'm going to say something that's not crazy." Chu Yang clenched his fists so hard that they made cracking sounds. But then, he suddenly became frivolous again and said with a smile, "You little thing, I'm going to kill you. Then, I'll lure your father to the Jin Emperor and use the Great Tomb to kill your father too. In this way, it won't be a loss for a genius like me to die. Don't you think so?" The ghost in the dark was speechless. Finally, he said in his heart, "This is definitely a lunatic." He was not the only one who thought so. Those who secretly followed Huang Fu Wuji were also frightened by Chu Yang. Chu Yang was even crazier and crazier than Huang Fu Wuji. As for Huang Fu Wuji, after hearing Chu Yang's words, he was so angry that he couldn't say anything. He could only laugh loudly. Chu Yang slowly recited for him, "Give a warm name to every river and every mountain stranger. I also wish you well, may you have a bright future. I wish you a happy ending for your lover, may you find happiness in the mortal world. I only wish to face the sea and enjoy the warm spring flowers." Good, good, good. Huang Fu Wuji was so angry that his heart and liver were about to explode. Ever since he was born, he had never loathed someone so much and hated someone so much. Of course! Boom! While speaking, Chu Yang suddenly exerted strength under his feet. The ground instantly exploded, like a star falling on the earth, forming a scene of destruction, a scene of doomsday. With such strength, Chu Yang appeared in front of Huang Fu Wuji in an instant. He punched at Huang Fu Wuji's nose with a simple and extremely violent punch. This punch was completely different from the previous one. It had no power, just like the punches used by street gangsters. Moreover, it seemed that Chu Yang's fighting skills were still very poor. He only knew how to hit his opponent's weak spot. Although Huang Fu Wuji was extremely furious and seemed to have lost all rationality, his mind was clearer than anyone else. Epic Fist. The Epic Fist was very simple. It was to control an epic and throw a punch. As far as Huang Fu Wuji knew, this lowly Chu Yang had at least mastered 3 epics: the Confucian epic, the Immortal epic, and the Shaman epic. This was child's play. Others might not know, but how could Huang Fu Wuji not know? Roar. Immediately, a heaven-shaking dragon's roar was heard. It reverberated through heaven and earth, as if it was going to pierce through heaven and earth. At the same time, endless golden light burst out from Huang Fu Wuji's body, dispelling the deathly gray around him and dyeing everything into a noble golden color. 9 golden 5-clawed golden dragons also appeared in an instant, surrounding him and protecting him in the center. In the face of Chu Yang's punch, he also punched out. His fist struck out like a dragon. As he punched out, a 5-clawed golden dragon that was 90,000 miles long appeared behind him and blasted towards Chu Yang along with the punch. The dragon's roar filled the sky, and the golden dragon's aura filled the world. The 90,000 miles long 5-clawed golden dragon could be seen everywhere in Central State. It shook the entire Central State as they felt the wrath of the emperor. Huang Fu Wuji, the eldest prince of the Jin dynasty, was naturally a dragon, and was related to the emperor. How many people in the heavenly spirit world could withstand such an attack? Who would dare to not submit to such a majesty of the emperor? However, as soon as the two came into contact, Huang Fu Wuji's fist directly exploded into pieces with a muffled bang. His flesh and bones were all turned into a bloody pulp that splattered in all directions. His entire arm even exploded into pieces one by one, and in the end it all turned into a bloody pulp and exploded into pieces. Chapter 26-28. Boom! Huang Fu Wuji was sent flying a few thousand miles away. Everything in his path exploded into pieces. The 90,000 miles long golden dragon in the sky was now like a huge snake, its body convulsing. On the other hand, Chu Yang was calm and composed. He didn't seem to have suffered any impact. It was as if he hadn't punched Huang Fu Wuji, but had kicked him away like a pebble. Victory and defeat were decided immediately, and the superior was decided immediately. Huang Fu Wuji was not Chu Yang's match at all. There was nothing strange about this. Chu Yang had cultivated to an extremely high level during his 9 reincarnation cycles, and could even kill the emperor several times. Huang Fu Wuji was no match for him. Even though Chu Yang didn't have that kind of power, he already had a high level of understanding and comprehension. The only thing he needed was to increase his power. With this understanding, it wasn't difficult to increase his power. This was more than enough to deal with Huang Fu Wuji. Huang Fu Wuji was the emperor's avatar, but it was a special one. Huang Fu Wuji was created by the emperor by splitting a part of his soul into reincarnation. This allowed him to be full of humanity, but at the same time, he was also greatly limited in terms of power. Of course, Huang Fu Wuji could borrow the emperor's power at any time and could even summon him. Once the Jin emperor appeared, Chu Yang was no match for him. However, Chu Yang wasn't worried about this at all. He even hoped that this would be the case. His goal at this moment was not only Huang Fu Wuji, but also the emperor. He wanted to drag the emperor into the tomb. What he said to Huang Fu Wuji earlier was at least 80% true because he felt that he only had a 20% chance of survival after entering the tomb. The tomb was one of the few methods that Chu Yang hadn't tried during his 9 reincarnations. He felt that this was the only place where he could find the power to kill the Emperor's true body. As for other methods, such as using the River of Fate to return to the past and kill the Emperor when he was still weak, Chu Yang had tried them all. Of course, there was another method that he had never tried before, the world where the divine cauldron was located. Entering the world of the god cauldron was a taboo, and he had a feeling that it would be about as dangerous as the great necropolis. That was why he had chosen it. The Great Tomb was the place where Shangguan Lan died. Even if he failed and died in the Great Tomb, he would be buried with Shangguan Lan, which was a bit of consolation. Trash, can you come back quickly? If you don't come back, I'll go see my Lan Lan and make you regret it for the rest of your life. With his hands behind his back, Chu Yang looked at Huang Fu Wuji from afar. A joyful smile appeared on his face as he mocked with a hoarse voice. Lowlife, I'm going to kill you. Huang Fu Wuji suffered a great blow and crazily screamed in the distance. Ha ha! Chu Yang laughed and said, What a joke. That sentence of yours is really too weak. It seems that your previous opponents were too weak. They didn't train you properly. Rumble. Heaven and earth trembled and rumbled in the distance like rolling thunder in the sky. Huang Fu Wuji quickly returned. During this process, all of his injuries had healed. His arm that had been blown apart had grown back in the blink of an eye as well. Chu Yang didn't care about this at all. The entire heavenly spirit world was the backing of the first prince, so it would be strange if he couldn't do this. Chapter 26-29. Chu Yang's words were even more vicious than his fist. Each of his words pierced into Huang Fu Wuji's heart. Huang Fu Wuji was so angry that he was about to explode. He roared, Bastard, do you have such ability? You're still not convinced? Call your father. Chu Yang's smile became even wider. However, his nerves were constantly on edge. Once the Jin Emperor appeared, he would immediately be in danger. He wouldn't be able to enter the tomb even if he wanted to. The inheritances of your epochs have all been destroyed. Only a bit of trash is left, not even enough to prolong their feeble existence. Meanwhile, the entire heavenly spirit world is mine. How are you going to fight me? Accompanied by this furious voice, Huang Fu Wuji was already close to Chu Yang. Along the path he took back, the void shattered like glass. Countless spatial fragments flew and swirled chaotically. Of course, he was telling the truth. The Confucian and immortal epochs that Chu Yang relied on were indeed destroyed. For example, the previous dynasty. Therefore, at this moment, Chu Yang was nothing more than using the treasures left behind by the previous dynasty to rebel. Dragon, 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 I am the true dragon, the king of the heaven and earth. Huang Fu Wuji had arrived. His voice seemed to be the command of the earthly king, the order of the grand Tao, and the will of the heaven and earth. The 9 golden dragons drilled out from the spatial storm and surrounded him once more. At the same time, he punched towards Chu Yang again. When he punched out, a golden dragon immediately appeared and coiled around his arm. It held an entire world in its mouth and blasted towards his fist. The golden dragon coiling around his arm seemed to be the golden dragon that was 90,000 miles long in the sky just now. It was incomparably shocking, and the world in its mouth was not illusory. It was a real world, as if it was the world of dragons. In the blink of an eye, the dragon's roar shattered the void and destroyed the world. If this was any other place, countless living beings would have exploded and died. Fortunately, this was the entrance of the tomb. Everything had been destroyed long ago. Chu Yang stared at the noiseless void and Huang Fu Wuji's shocking attack. His expression didn't change. He calmly put one hand behind his back and smiled. I'll only use one hand. Otherwise, when your father comes, he'll say that I'm bullying a child. Boom. As he spoke, his right hand didn't move at all. It simply moved forward and accurately met Huang Fu Wuji's fist. Lowlife, you're courting death. Too disdainful. Using one hand to block, he was treating Huang Fu Wuji like a child. Huang Fu Wuji's eyes were about to explode from anger. He exerted more strength in his rage. His fist became heavier, more powerful, more tyrannical, and more tyrannical, emitting a golden light that could cut through the void. Bang! Huang Fu Wuji's fist slammed into Chu Yang's hand. Contrary to his expectations, Chu Yang's hand didn't explode. Chu Yang's entire body was blown apart. That thin hand seemed to be stronger and heavier than the entire celestial spirit world. The golden dragon on his arm and the world in the golden dragon's mouth were unable to resist at all. They were directly swallowed by the thin palm. Huang Fu Wuji's entire body shook. Even his pupils were trembling. The fury on his face completely disappeared, and it was replaced by shock. He was frightened. Chapter 26:30. What are you wondering? Pa. Chu Yang clasped his hands together and grabbed Huang Fu Wuji's fist. He wasn't the least bit surprised by this. The Confucian, Immortal, and Witchcraft epics had been destroyed, leaving behind only the treasures. However, there were many worlds in Chu Yang's body. His 21 souls had formed 21 worlds. The worlds formed by the Destiny Twins were especially powerful. Once these worlds fused with the legacies of the Confucian epic, Immortal epic, and Witchcraft epic, wouldn't it mean that the Confucian epic, Immortal epic, and Witchcraft epic would reappear? Moreover, Chu Yang's flesh shell was a world. There were thousands of worlds above the three-dimensional coordinates in his body. Even if the worlds in his body were not strong enough, how could the worlds created by Huang Fu Wuji compare to them when they were stacked together? Therefore, there was no illusion. Moreover, Chu Yang did not use these worlds in the past and could not unleash the power of these worlds. However, after going through 9 reincarnations, his comprehension and vision were different. If he could only unleash 10% of the power of these worlds in the past, now he could unleash 100% of the power, or even 1,000 or 10,000 times. Hurry up and call your father. Huang Fu Wuji had never been a match for him, no matter when it was. As he spoke, Chu Yang suddenly exerted strength in his hand. Huang Fu Wuji's fist immediately exploded like a piece of tofu. Bang! He then punched Huang Fu Wuji's nose bridge. Huang Fu Wuji's nose disappeared in an instant. Amid the intense pain, sour, sweet, spicy, and so on burst out. Bang bang! Then, Chu Yang punched Huang Fu Wuji's eyes twice, causing his eyeballs to explode and explode. In an instant, Huang Fu Wuji's Venus, Jupiter, Mercury, Mars, and Saturn all appeared. Bang! Chu Yang punched Huang Fu Wuji again. Huang Fu Wuji's head was instantly smashed, and his brain juice splattered out. He hurriedly apologized. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to smash your head. I just wanted you to call your father out. After a pause, he looked at Ghost and the others, who were hidden in the void, and said, Everyone, please don't get too excited. Don't worry, this thing won't die for the time being, unless I'm sure that his father won't come out. With Chu Yang's current realm, the strength of his punch was so great that no one could survive from it. However, even if Huang Fu Wuji was smashed into pieces, he wouldn't die so easily. To be precise, Chu Yang could not kill Huang Fu Wuji without using his trump card. Heaven's decree. Huang Fu Wuji's brain juice had been beaten out of his head, but he could still roar as if nothing had happened. Furthermore, the terrifying injuries on his body had healed in an instant. His nose that had been smashed had returned to its original state, his eyes that had been smashed had returned to its original state, and even his battered head had returned to its original state in an instant. Rumble! Above the firmament, thunder rumbled. Heaven was enraged. Heaven was truly enraged because Huang Fu Wuji was the son of heaven. Rumble! A bolt of lightning struck down directly. The lightning illuminated the central continent. The heaven and earth were incomparably blazing as they shook violently. That extremely dazzling lightning tore open the void directly. Like a giant axe, it ruthlessly chopped down on Chu Yang's body. However, it seemed that the lightning was bigger than the rain. Chu Yang was unscathed from such a blow. At the same time, a decree appeared above Huang Fu Wuji's head. It floated there, surrounded by endless thunder, and the nine-tiered heavens appeared. Chapter 26:31. The Heaven's Edict, the symbol of controlling the heaven and earth. When a great emperor placed his heart and soul in the heaven and earth, he would form the Heaven's Edict. Taking another step forward, he would be able to live as long as the heaven and earth with boundless power. As long as he was in the Tianhun world, no one would be able to match him. Huang Fu Wuji was not a great emperor, but because he was the avatar of the Jin Emperor, he was actually more frightening and terrifying than a great emperor. This was clearly reflected on Chu Yang. The moment the Heaven's Edict appeared, the heaven and earth crazily squeezed and crushed Chu Yang. To Chu Yang, the entire world seemed to have turned into a giant grinder. What's the use of this? Buzz buzz buzz. Chu Yang's body slightly shook, and a layer of precious light blossomed from his body. The pressure and grinding of the heaven and earth stopped in an instant. It seemed as if the power source of this huge grinding machine had been pulled out. This thing, I can clearly tell you that my path is similar to that of an immortal. I emphasize on myself, not relying on the heaven and earth, only relying on myself. In the end, I will transcend the entire Tianhun world. If the heaven dies, I will not age. If the heaven dies, I will not die. But Chu Yang paused. He raised his hand and slapped Huang Fu Wuji's face. He sneered. Now, can you call me father? This has two meanings. First, you can call me father, but I don't have an unfilial son like you. Second, hurry up and call me father, understand? Huang Fu Wuji covered his burning right cheek. His crazed and angry expression suddenly disappeared. Although he was still gloomy and cold, he was more calm and serene, as well as calm and steady. His gaze was extremely dignified as he stared at Chu Yang. You shouldn't be able to control this kind of power at your level. His transformation was very shocking. He had never been crazy, nor was he crazy. The reason why he was temperamental was because he had no scruples and was lawless. However, at this time, he seemed to have met the law, met the heavens. This was caused by the change in power. Chu Yang was all too clear about this. The reason why he could do this was naturally the accumulation of 9 reincarnations. You're just a piece of trash, so you can only understand the matters of trash. You won't understand anything else even if I tell you. He sneered and raised his hand to grab Huang Fu Wuji's neck in front of him. Although Huang Fu Wuji wanted to dodge, he couldn't. Kiki. Without any suspense, Chu Yang grabbed Huang Fu Wuji by the neck and lifted him up. Huang Fu Wuji let out a strange noise from his throat and stuck out his long tongue. Since you don't want to call your father, I'll do it for you. Chu Yang lifted Huang Fu Wuji up high and shouted towards the sky. Jin Emperor, your son is in my hands. If you don't come out now, I'll strangle him to death. How dare you? Suddenly, an emotionless voice came from the heaven and earth. It wasn't very loud and didn't seem to have any power. However, once it entered Chu Yang's ears, he immediately started bleeding from his 7 orifices. His body shook violently as great fear and reverence appeared in his heart. He couldn't help but want to kneel down immediately. Along with this voice, a grand force erupted from his body. It seemed to want to blow him into ashes in the blink of an eye. It was as if it wanted to treat him as dirt and directly erase him. This force seemed to have transcended all laws of matter and turned everything into an illusion. It could do whatever it wanted and achieve whatever it wanted. It was indescribable. The Tao could be said, but it was not the Tao. An indescribable Tao didn't have 1,000th of its mysteries. Gene Emperor. Chapter 2632. Not only was Chu Yang severely injured, but he was also on the verge of losing himself and completely submitting to the Gene Emperor. However, he was prepared for this. He had experienced this in the 9 reincarnations, so he was not unfamiliar with it at all. He was not in awe and could deal with it easily. Just now, he was half acting and he was still acting. Bang, bang, bang. On his body, a series of explosions occurred along his skeleton. Bloody holes were blasted open one after another. The explosions caused his flesh and blood to splatter everywhere. His body was in tatters, and he trembled incessantly. He withstood all of this. In the end, he still didn't let go of Huang Fuwuji. He was still choking Huang Fuwuji's neck. He still didn't fall down. Blood flowed all over the ground. His whole body was covered in blood and even his face was dyed red. Although I've already experienced all this in my 9 reincarnations, and my soul has long adapted to it, my body has never truly experienced it. What I've shown is just right. He shouldn't have been able to see anything. At this moment, Chu Yang was also pondering in his mind. This was the first time he met the Gene Emperor and felt the Gene Emperor's majesty. If his performance was unreasonable and showed his strangeness, the Gene Emperor would suspect him. Therefore, he had always been worried about this, but now he found that everything was very simple and easy. Ha ha! He couldn't help but laugh out loud. Old Gene Emperor, this is not enough. You can't kill me or save your son. But it seems that I have a chance to bury you with him. This guy was crazy. When the ghost in the dark heard Chu Yang's words, he was completely stunned. He found it hard to believe that Chu Yang dared to talk to the Gene Emperor like this. What was this if not crazy? Chu Yang. It's me. You've really surprised me. The voice no longer came from the sky and was no longer emotionless like the Heaven Duke's voice. It suddenly appeared in front of Chu Yang and drilled into his ears. The voice also contained great surprise. At this moment, a tall figure appeared in front of him. Tall, very tall, almost 3 meters tall. Big, very big. This person's skeleton was huge, 5 or 6 times larger than those burly people. This person looked like a giant, but he was not human at all. There was a strange power and aura on his body that made people feel that he was not the same kind. Only Chu Yang could feel this feeling because others couldn't feel it as deeply as him. Even now, he still couldn't figure out why the Gene Emperor's body was so strange. Of course, this person was the Gene Emperor. Outside of this, the Emperor didn't seem to be any different from other people. The only difference was that his face was much bigger than others. Perhaps because of this, it was hard to tell that the Emperor was handsome with such a large face. At this moment, the Emperor finally appeared in front of Chu Yang. This time, he was no longer in the cycle of reincarnation. Even if he failed, he could try again. Thus, when he saw this familiar face, he couldn't help but have a strange feeling. That strange feeling might be due to nervousness, or it might be due to the switch between reality and illusion, or it might be due to the great pressure he was under. If he were to lose this time, he would be completely defeated, and he would not have any more chances. This is my last chance. Secretly, Chu Yang's left hand suddenly clenched tightly. The Gene Emperor was also looking at Chu Yang. Chapter 2633. In the current era, perhaps only Chu Yang could calmly face the Gene Emperor's gaze. Only Chu Yang could do so. Otherwise, if it were anyone else, they would have been reduced to ashes by now, with nothing left behind. You're not bad. The Emperor finally spoke. I'll give you a chance. The Emperor placed his hands behind his back and slightly lowered his head. Follow me. Follow the emperor? What a great fortune this was! What a great honor this was! Who knew how many people would wish for it but couldn't? But this person was Chu Yang. Ha ha! Chu Yang laughed. Your Majesty, you think I'll be a dog? Follow me, not a dog. After hearing this, Gui and the others who followed Huang Fu Wuji were shocked. They weren't even the Jin Emperor's dogs, yet the Jin Emperor gave Chu Yang such high treatment. Even after Chu Yang contradicted him, the Jin Emperor didn't become angry at all and even gave an explanation. Unimaginable, simply unimaginable. Who else could be so valued by the Emperor? Ha ha! Chu Yang laughed again and looked up at the Jin Emperor. Jin Emperor, how about following me? Chu Yang used the same posture and tone as the Jin Emperor and spoke in a condescending manner. The world suddenly froze. Ghost and the others in the dark were horrified and couldn't help but reveal themselves. They seemed to be frightened to death. The Emperor's eyes turned cold. In the blink of an eye, time and space began to reverse. Everything wanted to go back to the past before Huang Fu Wuji was choked by Chu Yang. A great space-time power instantly fell on Chu Yang's body. He couldn't control his body, and was about to be sucked into space-time and pulled to another time period. But he quickly stabilized himself. He was like a reef in the sea. No matter how the space-time power hit him, he didn't move an inch. Humph, Your Majesty, I've already suffered this in the 9 reincarnations, yet you still want to succeed. He sneered in his mind. However, only he knew that he had learned a painful lesson because of this. Even though those scenes had happened in reincarnation, they were still bloody when he recalled them now. In fact, he could still feel the pain at this moment. The power of fate. The space-time power suddenly came to a halt without any warning. The Emperor's voice came again. You are the child of fate. He instantly knew the power in Chu Yang's body. In fact, he instantly understood everything about Chu Yang. Ha ha! Chu Yang laughed again. Your Majesty, I'm the child of fate. It's not too much to ask for you to be buried with me. The Emperor narrowed his eyes for the first time. Even if you are the child of fate, it's impossible for you to use the passage to kill me. Is that so? Then I'll give it a try. Chu Yang raised his hand and threw Huang Fu Wuji in the direction of the tomb. He then rushed towards the tomb as well. However, with a single thought from the Emperor, time and space came to a standstill. This was the case even at the entrance of the tomb. Time and space were completely under the Emperor's control. Chu Yang and Huang Fu Wuji were both frozen in space. Child of fate, I told you before that even if you are the child of fate, it's impossible for you to use the passage to kill me. What do you think now? As he spoke, with a thought, Huang Fu Wuji removed himself from the frozen world and directly flew back. However, at this moment, the ground beneath his feet suddenly vanished silently, revealing a huge black hole. Chapter 2634. Not good. The Jin Emperor's expression greatly changed. His huge eyes trembled as the entrance to the tomb quietly appeared beneath his feet. Ha ha! Chu Yang, who was in a state of stillness, suddenly broke out of his stillness. He laughed and said, Jin Emperor, did you only realize it now? Buzz. As Chu Yang laughed, his movements did not stop at all. Illusory worlds appeared one after another behind him. One of the illusory worlds represented an era that had been destroyed. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 epochs appeared. Confucian epoch, Immortal epoch, Sword epoch, Saber epoch, Buddha epoch. Where did you get so many epochs? The Emperor's voice was full of anger. He was actually tricked by an ant. Because I'm the child of fate, ha. Chu Yang ridiculed. Jin Emperor, I'm the child of destiny. You couldn't pull me back with your space-time power, so how can you imprison me with your space-time power? Are you stupid? Ha! He was too happy and thought that the Emperor was nothing more than this. Earlier, he only used the momentary pause to reveal the various epochs in his body. However, the emperor didn't notice it, so he succeeded. As for why the passageway to the great necropolis had suddenly expanded, it was naturally because of the eras that had been destroyed. The great necropolis was the end of everything, and any eras that had been destroyed would naturally be absorbed into the great necropolis. Now that so many eras had suddenly appeared, the great necropolis naturally reacted. However, Chu Yang was the only one who could scheme against the Jin Emperor because the Emperor couldn't see through Chu Yang's thoughts. If it was someone else, let alone scheming, the Emperor would know exactly what they were thinking. However, Chu Yang's joy was short-lived. He couldn't even fully laugh before it was swallowed up. Moreover, he didn't have the strength to resist at all. The power coming from the tomb was too frightening. This was the first time he regretted entering the tomb. The tomb was far more frightening than he imagined. The ghosts who were responsible for protecting and following Huangfu Wuji were also silently swallowed by the tomb. They couldn't resist at all. Second body, save, Huangfu Wuji fell a bit later because of the Emperor. Nevertheless, the Emperor couldn't save him in the end. Before he could even finish calling for help, he was swallowed up by the great necropolis. Whether it was Chu Yang or anyone else, they were devoured by the great necropolis without the slightest bit of resistance. Damn it! Whoosh! The Emperor couldn't stop the devouring force of the tomb and fell straight down. However, he was the only one who made a sound as if he was the only one with weight. Rumble! The world trembled. The Jin Emperor, who had just disappeared into the tomb, suddenly reappeared. In the blink of an eye, he was as tall as the sky. The entire central continent and heavenly spirit world could see him clearly, shocking the entire world. Alas, this didn't work. Though the Emperor was no longer falling, he still couldn't get out of the tomb. Even if a pair of gigantic hands appeared in the sky and tried to pull him out, it still wouldn't work. In the end, he decisively cut himself in half. Only then was the gigantic hand of heaven able to pull him out of the great tomb and disappear without a trace. This period of time was extremely short, but a great change had taken place. The heavens collapsed and the earth was destroyed. The entire heavenly spirit world was shaken. Thunder rumbled in every space and time above the firmament. Blood rain fell from the sky and the world was dyed red. Heavenly spirit world was changing everywhere as if the end of the world was coming. Chapter 26:35. Darkness. He could sense the deathly gray darkness. Deathly stillness. It seemed to be a temporary deathly stillness that would soon be broken by a sound. This was what Chu Yang felt when he first fell into the great tomb. At first, it didn't feel too bad, and he could still struggle a little, but this feeling soon disappeared. Darkness, it became endless darkness. Not to mention deathly gray, he couldn't even sense the darkness anymore. Deathly stillness, it was no longer just deathly stillness, because not only was there no sound, everything was no longer there. Even the darkness didn't exist, there was nothing, there didn't even seem to be anything. At this moment, he didn't even know if he had entered the great tomb, or if he was at the edge of the great tomb. Following that, his various senses also quickly disappeared. Sight, touch, hearing, smell, taste, the first thing to disappear was his physical body. His flesh shell didn't seem to be a real existence, it seemed to be a drawing on a blackboard. With a gentle rub, his flesh shell began to disappear. There was no pain, no feeling, it just disappeared. It was the same with his memories. They were gently erased. Chu Yang felt as if his entire person and everything related to himself had completely disappeared within a short period of time. So this is the great tomb, it's so terrifying. I don't feel any death, but it's 10,000 times more terrifying than death. This was his last consciousness. His consciousness had disappeared, completely disappeared. With his consciousness gone, he naturally couldn't think or feel anything, it was as if he had never existed. Everything was strange and abrupt, a living person was gone just like that. But after an unknown period of time, Chu Yang faintly regained a faint trace of consciousness. In the process of recovering this trace of consciousness, he felt as if he had gone from a non-living substance to a living substance after an extremely long period of time. It was like the origin of life. In the primitive sea, he was just a simple organic substance that constantly reacted, and then after an extremely long period of time, he gradually became a primitive life form. After that, the primitive life form continued to evolve, becoming a primitive human, becoming a clan member, and finally becoming a human again. In this process, he seemed to have not only experienced the origin of life, but also the entire process of life evolving into a human. At this time, his consciousness had completely recovered, and he found that his consciousness was completely attached to the divine cauldron. Other than the divine cauldron, he could not sense anything else. It seemed that other than the divine cauldron, there was nothing else. There was no darkness, no space, no time, and no dust. There was nothing. Am I in the great tomb? Is this how it is in the great tomb? Everything is non-existent? The divine cauldron can stop the great tomb, but can it save you? Chu Yang couldn't help but have countless thoughts in his mind. Everything was unknown and unsolvable. In addition to endless doubts, there were still endless doubts in his mind. As this situation continued, facing the endless nothingness, he could only rely on his own memories to recall or think about countless things to kill time. Time was too long, as if it would never end. Very soon, he focused all his energy on cultivation. The heavenly spirit world's martial system, the martial arts system of the gods, the immortal epoch, the Confucian epoch, the shaman epoch, the various epochs. Chapter 2636. In the end, the martial way could no longer allow him to waste time and forget the existence of time. However, he had nothing better to do. He could only start studying the martial way again and again. Again and again, every time he repeated, he would count, but in the end, he didn't even know how many times he had repeated it. In the end, the martial way finally lost its effect. He was almost unable to resist such nothingness, and his consciousness began to slowly disappear bit by bit. Perhaps there was a person who could live in isolation from the world, but there was no analogy to his situation. In the entire world, other than himself, nothing existed, nothing existed. What kind of terror was that? No, there is nothing, 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 there is nothing. That's not right, there is still the divine cauldron. The divine cauldron was Chu Yang's life-saving straw. It was his only hope. It was the reason why he had persevered. From the very beginning, he had been studying the divine cauldron crazily, trying to understand something from the divine cauldron. However, he couldn't understand anything at all. As for the divine cauldron, he had been using it to kill time. As his consciousness slowly disappeared, the divine cauldron also slowly disappeared. He did not struggle, nor did he struggle. Instead, he prayed that his consciousness would disappear quickly. To him, this was a form of relief. He really couldn't hold on any longer. However, when his consciousness completely disappeared, he actually regained consciousness once again. However, it felt very strange, as if his consciousness no longer existed, and had also become nothingness. In this state, in the state of nothingness, he could no longer feel any pain, because his own body, his own consciousness was also nothingness. It did not exist, and it was also nothingness. He did not exist, so how could there be any pain? At this time, he finally realized that the divine cauldron was also nothingness. It did not exist at all, and it was also nothingness. Nothingness, is this the secret of the divine cauldron? In the midst of nothingness, Chu Yang suddenly had such a thought. The divine cauldron suddenly became real, but after a tremble, it became nothingness again, and then completely disappeared. During this process, Chu Yang's state changed along with the divine cauldron, and completely disappeared along with it. This time, the disappearance was short, and completely different from the others. When Chu Yang returned to the state of existence and recovered his senses, he suddenly realized that he was in an endless dark universe. In front of him, there were two people who seemed to be glued to him and were emitting light. "I'm finally out of the tomb!" Chu Yang shuddered with excitement. However, all of this disappeared in the blink of an eye. After such a long time, the heavenly spirit world and the God's world should have turned into dust, while the Jin Emperor should be deader than dead. Those people from the past, those things from the past, I'm afraid they've already vanished into thin air. He couldn't resist the sudden surge of sadness in his heart. He entered the nothingness state and slowly adjusted himself. After a long time, he once again looked at the only source of light in front of him, the two people who were stuck together. The two people who were stuck together had their own heads and limbs. However, parts of their bodies were stuck together and even overlap. It was as if they shared the same heart or even multiple organs. It looks like a deformed person, but in fact, it's just a strangely shaped world. Chu Yang soon saw the situation clearly. In this strangely shaped world, there seemed to be two worlds superimposed on each other, and there was another world in the superimposed part. Three worlds fused together. What kind of world is this? Why is it so strangely shaped, like a deformed person? Chapter 26:37. At the center of the world, Chu Yang saw an illusory divine cauldron that looked exactly like the one inside his body. Using the illusory divine cauldron as a starting point, he found the medicinal wine bottle that used the four sovereigns, azure dragon, white tiger, vermilion bird, and black tortoise, to brew medicinal wine. During his trip to the God's world, Chu Yang entered the medicinal wine bottle from the starting ground, then entered the forbidden world. Under the arrangements of the infinite dominator and Bing, he seized the divine cauldron. After the divine cauldron was seized, an illusory divine cauldron was built in the forbidden world to replace it. If that's the forbidden world, then the two worlds on its left and right should be the heavenly spirit world and the God's world. Chu Yang couldn't help but tremble. His mind was in a daze. After such a long time, the heavenly spirit world and the God's world still existed. Could it be that the long time I sensed was just a short period of time for the heavenly spirit world and the God's world? The moment this thought appeared in his mind, he immediately turned his gaze to the heavenly spirit world and looked at the eastern wilderness. Soon, he saw a bustling crowd. It was the prosperous eastern wilderness, and his big brother Chu Fei was the ruler of the eastern wilderness, ruling over the entire eastern wilderness. His parents, his big sister Chu Na, his second brother Qi Nin, his junior brother Silver Wolf, Little Guai, the parrot Little Five, and Little Six were all there. Whoosh! Chu Yang was a little afraid that everything he saw would disappear. His gaze immediately swept from the eastern wilderness to the east continent, and when his gaze landed on the east continent, he immediately felt a faint connection. At the same time, in the Sky Academy of the East Continent, the sound of a bell rang out, shaking the entire East Continent. The demonic bell, the emperor weapon Chu Yang obtained from the Seven Wheels demonic realm. At this moment, Chu Yang was finally sure that everything was real. He didn't miss out on any of this. The so-called endless time only existed in the Great Tomb for him. After that, his gaze shifted from the East State to the Central State. He looked at the Taijing city of the Central State and immediately saw a huge hole with endless gray qi surging inside. At this moment, there were many people gathered at the edge of the cave. Among them were Rui Zi, the pretty boy Wei Xian, Xia Wanjin, Lu Yunpeng, the remaining 5 young masters of Taijing City, Wu Chou, Kong Jingshi, Qin Gua, and the others. In the end, Chu Yang's gaze fell on a lonely and sorrowful figure, Shao Xiang talented female teacher Dan Feng. Sigh, I didn't expect this. I really didn't expect that the god of traps would die in the biggest trap. At least he died in the right place. Is there anything in the world that's bigger and deeper than the Great Tomb? I'm afraid that only such a trap could trap a god of traps like him to death. If a trap like the Great Necropolis can't kill this trickster god, then no one in this world can. He's going to be invincible and lonely like the snow. Separated by time and space, Chu Yang was in the dark universe. With his powerful cultivation, he could clearly hear the discussions around the cave. He could even hear some people whispering. Chu Yang is truly amazing. I heard that the Jin Emperor was almost killed by him the day before yesterday. During the Heaven Change, the Jin Emperor of Central State revealed his true form and was as tall as the sky. In the end, he had no choice but to abandon the lower half of his body. I heard that it was all because of the divine fragrance talented girl. That's why this trickster god Chu Yang wanted to kill the Jin Emperor. I also heard that the reason why Chu Yang divorced the divine fragrance talented girl was because the first prince forced him to do so. Once the divine fragrance talented girl died, he immediately exploded. Not only did he want to kill the first prince, but he also wanted to kill the Jin Emperor. Among the whispers, Chu Yang heard the most exciting thing. The day before yesterday, he killed the Jin Emperor the day before yesterday. In this case, it only took him 1 day to enter the Great Tomb and come out. Chapter 2638. The Great Necropolis, an unimaginable great necropolis. Chu Yang slowly calmed down. Everything miraculous was attributed to the Great Necropolis, and only in a place like the Great Necropolis could something like this happen. What did you experience in the Great Necropolis? Suddenly, a voice came from the endless darkness of the universe, scaring Chu Yang half to death. Who is it? He turned around, but there was nothing behind him. The Great Necropolis did not exist behind him. The Great Necropolis, the end of everything, did not appear in the world. There is no need to be afraid. You will know who I am when you see me. The voice came again, and then a beam of light shot out from the endless darkness of the universe. After a while, he saw that it was a person, and a hunchbacked old man who had lost all his teeth and hair. The old man's entire body glowed, especially his lower abdomen, where the light burned brightly. And in the depths of the light, the 100-layered heavens appeared. Infinite Dominator! When he saw the 100-layered heavens, Chu Yang's 3D paradise coordinates trembled slightly. He could not help but blurt out, instantly understanding the old man's meaning. How could Chu Yang not know about the Infinite Dominator? He had entered the God world from the heavenly spirit realm, and used the lightning tribulation to blow up the God world's world barrier, inexplicably forming the 100-layered heavens. Then, in the forbidden world, under the arrangements of the Infinite Dominator and Bing, he had stolen the divine cauldron. The Infinite Dominator was deeply connected to him. But he never imagined that at this time, in this place, he would see the Infinite Dominator so unexpectedly. His heart was filled with countless doubts. I am the Infinite Dominator. The old man had already arrived in front of Chu Yang. At this time, Chu Yang could see him even more clearly. The Infinite Dominator did not even have eyebrows, but there was not a single wrinkle on his face, which was incomparably smooth. You don't need to ask me, I will naturally tell you everything in a moment. What is your current realm? Upon seeing Chu Yang, the Infinite Dominator's smooth face immediately glowed with light. That light was very strange, as if it was the light of hope. He seemed to know what Chu Yang was thinking, but he seemed to be more urgent, so Chu Yang could only hold back. When he thought of the Infinite Lord's question, he frowned slightly and said, I don't know what realm I'm at right now. How long have you been in the Great Tomb? The old man asked again. Chu Yang fell into deep thought again. Maybe it's hundreds of millions of years, maybe it's even longer. It's so long that it's hard to imagine, but maybe it's only one day. I'm not sure. It was like he didn't know anything. The old man's smooth brows furrowed. Show me your highest realm. In an instant, Chu Yang was in a dilemma. He hesitated. He was not familiar with the infinite dominator, and it would not be wise for him to expose his secret. However, he followed his instincts and did as he was told. In an instant, he vanished into thin air without a trace. Was this Chu Yang's highest realm? The infinite dominator's old eyes widened like those of an ox. He was extremely astonished, and then a look of extreme shock appeared on his face. He actually could not sense Chu Yang's existence. It was as if Chu Yang had not vanished, but had never existed. Whether it was in space-time or in fate, there was not a single trace of Chu Yang. What realm is this? The infinite dominator was unable to determine, so he asked directly. I don't know either. Perhaps it's called nothing. Chu Yang's figure appeared once more. Nothing. Chapter 2639. After a pause, he hurriedly added, Nothing means that you don't exist. And if you don't exist, you can't be killed or defeated. If that's the case, even if you can't win against those beasts, you definitely won't lose. Chu Yang was shocked by what the infinite dominator had said. Nothingness was such an understanding that he was instantly enlightened. Countless thoughts flashed through his mind, but the infinite dominator's voice jolted him back to reality. Do you think the heavenly soul world and myriad god world were originally deformed worlds? This question left Chu Yang dumbfounded. How could he possibly know? Can you imagine? There were once 3,000 worlds in this universe, but now, only the heavenly soul world and myriad god world remain? The infinite sovereign's withered arm suddenly pointed at the dark and empty universe in front of him. Chu Yang couldn't help but be shocked. There were once 3,000 worlds here. Of those, 2,998 were swallowed up by the deformed world. Now, only the heavenly soul world and myriad god world remain, and the heavenly soul world and myriad god world are on the verge of collapse. Chu Yang was shocked. As for the so-called deformed world, he could confirm without a doubt from the infinite sovereign's gaze. The forbidden world between the heavenly soul world and myriad god world was the deformed world the infinite sovereign spoke of, but he still had questions. Senior, before this junior entered the great tomb, he clearly felt the heavenly soul world's heavenly Tao grow stronger. How could it be swallowed up? That's because the divine cauldron was stolen by you. Chu Yang felt as if he had been hit by a stick. He was stunned again. He was even more confused now. Isn't there a great connection between these two things? The infinite sovereign was very clear about Chu Yang's doubts. He immediately explained, the deformed world, what is deformed? It is precisely because they are deformed that they can only survive by swallowing other worlds. In other words, the deformed world has fatal flaws, but the divine cauldron allows them to ignore these flaws. The divine cauldron, nothingness. The mystery of the divine cauldron was woo-woo. Under the effect of woo-woo, the fatal flaw was equivalent to not having any. From this, it seemed to be logical. As Chu Yang listened, he speculated. All of a sudden, he realized that the secrets of the essence of the great necropolis were different from the divine cauldron. He had only comprehended the profundities of the divine cauldron in an environment like the great necropolis. But he didn't say anything. All he did was quietly listen to the infinite sovereign's explanation. After the divine cauldron was stolen by us, many huge creatures or extremely small creatures in the deformed realm were almost wiped out in an instant, leaving only their final existences, the worms. And because there are no longer these deformed creatures devouring the heavenly soul world and God world's essence, the heavenly soul world and God world's essence will naturally grow stronger. The heavenly soul realm and the God's realm were still in the process of growth, But the reason why the two realms were stagnant was because the deformed worlds had swallowed up their origins. Chu Yang seemed to have a general understanding of the situation, but he was still puzzled. Senior, according to what you said, the speed at which the deformed worlds devoured their origins shouldn't be too excessive. How could they have swallowed all 3,000 worlds in one go, leaving only the heavenly soul world and the God's realm? They wanted to devour so many worlds. Do you think they had it easy? The infinite sovereign couldn't help but coldly snort. During this process, the creatures in the deformed realm were nearly wiped out, and they became extremely weak. Moreover, their fatal flaw was infinitely magnified. Otherwise, how could the heavenly soul world and the God's realm still exist? Senior is saying that because the deformed realm was heavily damaged, the heavenly soul world and the God's realm were able to linger on until now. At this moment, Chu Yang could faintly see the tragic battle of the universe. But what kind of existences were the creatures in the deformed realm? How could they be so strong? Generally speaking, Senior, if the divine cauldron is so important to the deformed realm, why was it so easily stolen by us? This was also the biggest question in Chu Yang's mind. He had obtained the divine cauldron too easily. Chapter 2640. Chu Yang was shocked. What do you mean? Does the infinite dominator know about my transmigrated identity? This was too shocking. His biggest secret had actually been exposed. Moreover, he could tell that the reason he had transmigrated seemed to be because the universe he was in had sent him to support this universe. But was that possible? He was just an ant. How could he be so powerful as to save another universe? You don't have to doubt. Although you are small, you have the luck of another universe, like an adopted child. Because of this, you don't belong to this universe, so you aren't in the space-time of this universe, nor are you in the destiny of this universe. Therefore, they can't sense your existence. Therefore, it can be said that the deformed realm can't sense your existence. Of course, it's only when you are weak that you are invisible to them. That's why you were able to steal the divine cauldron under our arrangements. There was no need for Chu Yang to ask. The infinite dominator had explained everything thoroughly. However, Chu Yang didn't understand. Since he didn't belong to this space-time and wasn't in this space-time, and he was invisible, then why could others see him? This was very strange and completely illogical. Moreover, if this was the case, then what was he? Chu Yang asked directly, Senior, since I'm invisible, why can't the deformed realm see me, but others can? That's very simple. The infinite dominator said straightforwardly, because the will of this universe acted on you when you entered the deformed realm, activating the attributes of your other universe, causing you to be invisible. And only at that moment, you were almost invisible. It's so complicated. Anyway, I don't understand. Chu Yang's head hurt a little. He couldn't understand the principle at all, nor could he figure it out. Actually, I don't really understand either. The infinite dominator finally said, You just have to remember one thing. You are the adopted son of another universe, the son of this universe. And your mission is to save your family and be the master of your family. That doesn't seem easy. Chu Yang could only smile bitterly. What else could he say? To be more precise, he suddenly knew so many shocking secrets. His mind was completely muddled, and he didn't know what to do. Not easy? The eternal dominator suddenly laughed, causing Chu Yang to stare blankly for a moment. This was because, ever since the infinite dominator had appeared, his face had been completely devoid of wrinkles and was incomparably smooth. But now, he was actually smiling. After chuckling, the eternal ruler teased, Kid, do you still want to know where your woman is? My woman? Chu Yang was stunned at first, but then his head exploded. He immediately became extremely excited. His eyes shone with a piercing light as he hurriedly asked, Senior, are you saying that Lon Lon isn't dead? Where is she right now? In his excitement, he reached out and grabbed the Eternal Sovereign, the old man whose hair and teeth had all fallen out of his mouth. In fact, he even lifted him off the ground. Shangguan Lan actually didn't die after falling into the great tomb. Chu Yang had never expected this. He was overjoyed. The great tomb was so astonishing and terrifying that if he didn't have the divine cauldron, he wouldn't have been able to get out. But even so, he had stayed inside for hundreds of millions of years and suffered endless torment. Therefore, even though he had hoped that Shangguan Lan was still alive, after experiencing the horror of the great tomb, that glimmer of hope was completely extinguished. It was simply impossible. Chapter 2641. Like a beam of light, Chu Yang instantly arrived at the edge of the deformed realm. As soon as he exerted his strength, the entire universe suddenly shone brightly. The 2,998 worlds that were once devoured appeared and entered Chu Yang's body. At the same time, a great light shot out from the depths of the universe and landed behind him. At this moment, the entire universe seemed to be his body, and he himself seemed to be a big hand of the universe. Endless power filled his body. At this moment, the space-time was like a net containing a basketball to him. When he used the space-time force of the universe to wrap the deformed realm, it was really like holding a net containing a basketball. As soon as it was wrapped, he directly disappeared into thin air. It was easy to the extreme. Everything was far easier than he had imagined. Chu Yang even had a feeling that he was like bringing a basketball to a court to play basketball. The moment he disappeared into thin air, because of his thoughts, the universe had already revealed the great tomb. He directly teleported into the great tomb, then through the deformed realm into the great tomb, and immediately teleported out again. Everything was going so smoothly that it couldn't be any smoother. Waha, this marshal is really a genius. As soon as Chu Yang succeeded, it was as if he had removed a stone from his heart. The pressure was gone, and his whole body felt relaxed. It was as if there was nothing around him, and his whole body was light as a feather. He couldn't help but laugh loudly in the universe with his hands on his hip. He was extremely proud. Rumble. Immediately after, because of the disappearance of the deformed realm, the universe shook again. Instantly, from the heavenly soul world and the God's world, two figures flew out and arrived in front of Chu Yang in the blink of an eye. One of them was the Gene Emperor of the heavenly soul world. He was more than 3 meters tall and extremely huge. The other one didn't look like much at first. His figure was also ordinary, but when he arrived in front of Chu Yang, his body instantly grew infinitely, as if he was as tall as the sky, as tall as the universe, and even the entire universe couldn't bear his weight. The supreme ruler of the God's world. Originally, Chu Yang thought that this was the Gene Emperor's original body, but from the Ice Kuan, he learned that there was another insect, and this insect was the ultimate existence of their entire deformed world. The supreme ruler of the God's world was also much more powerful than Chu Yang had imagined. However, the two of them didn't rush into the great tomb to rescue the deformed world as he and the Ice Kuan had expected. They didn't rush into the great tomb to rescue the deformed world or kill him immediately. They stood in front of Chu Yang, and they didn't seem to have any intention of attacking him. They merely stared coldly at Chu Yang, and their eyes were filled with disdain. This was especially true for the highest ruler of the God realm. He was so tall that it was impossible to tell how tall he was. His two huge eyes looked like two stars. Son of the universe, nice to meet you. The two emperors didn't speak, but a voice suddenly came from between them. Chu Yang was startled, but he couldn't see anything when he tried to find the source of the voice. Then, his pupils shook violently. He saw an extremely tiny insect, almost as small as a speck of dust. He couldn't see it with his eyes, so he could only rely on his divine perception. At this moment, this extremely tiny insect was glowing. It was completely revealed. Its body was slender and soft. Its head was small. Its antennae were short and bristly. Its compound eyes were well developed. It had 2 pairs of triangular wings. It was fragile and membranous. Its front wings were large and its hind wings were small. Mayfly. In an instant, Chu Yang knew how to describe this insect. A mayfly that lives in the morning and dies in the evening. Chapter 2642. Your insect. Chu Yang's voice was solemn. He sensed that the opponent was too calm. I am insect. Insect said. Aren't you surprised, child of the universe? Chu Yang's eyes narrowed. You think I'm surprised? You should know that you've lost. You're just a mayfly. A mayfly? Insect sneered. So what if I'm a mayfly? Can there be different nobility in this universe? You think you can be proud just because you're a human? You'll only be food in my mouth later. Shameless boasting. Chu Yang felt even more uneasy, but he didn't admit defeat. I'm the child of the universe, the master of this part of the universe. This universe is my support, yet you dare to act so presumptuously in this place. Then I'll show you how presumptuous I am. As soon as Chang's words fell, the Jin Emperor and the supreme ruler of the divine world moved. Both of them flicked their fingers, and a black light beam shot straight at Chu Yang. The black beam of light pierced through the universe. It even had a different kind of aura. It was completely different from this universe. It was like the aura of another universe. The moment it entered Chu Yang's eyes, the image of a universe being devoured by countless insects appeared in his mind. Some were as big as the universe while others were as small as specks of dust. They came in all shapes and sizes and devoured a universe in the blink of an eye. He couldn't move at all, as if the weight of the universe was pressing down on him. It was as if countless insects had landed on him and were madly gnawing away at him. 2 black beams of light easily pierced through his body. Instantly, he disappeared without a trace. The Emperor and the Overlord of the Gods didn't attack again. They just stared at Chu Yang's original position, and Insect did the same. They remained motionless as if they really believed that Chu Yang was dead but didn't rescue the deformed world. It seemed that all 3 of them were dead at this moment. What happened? Of course, Chu Yang didn't die. He transformed into nothingness and disappeared. After that, he reappeared at the border of the heavenly soul world and the God's world, trying to absorb the 2 worlds into his body. However, the other party's reaction made him feel very strange. Under the state of nothingness, everything was very easy, and Chu Yang succeeded very quickly. However, he was even more confused, but he couldn't care too much because he had to take care of the living beings of the heavenly soul world and the myriad gods world. Otherwise, who knew what would happen if a real battle broke out? Let's not talk about that for now. Let's take Lanlin's world first. Then, we'll see what the other party is made of. He forcibly suppressed the doubts in his heart and flew to where Shangguan Lan was. At this time, he suddenly realized that Chong and the other 2 had followed closely behind him. His heart skipped a beat. What on earth is going on? He was sure that the other party was definitely scheming something, and was definitely not fooled by his lawless state. But at this time, he had no way out. He quickly absorbed the world that Shangguan Lan had transformed into his body. Child of the universe, thank you for letting me observe the mysteries of nothingness. As soon as Insect's voice drilled into Chu Yang's ears, Chu Yang was almost dumbfounded. He couldn't help but blurt out, "So that's your purpose. What do you think?" Insect sneered. "I'm only 1 step away from comprehending the mysteries of nothingness. Once I comprehend it, how can life and death exist? If the body didn't exist, then naturally there would be no life and death. Insect would certainly have a great comprehension, and his strength would be even more amazing. You've succeeded. You can make your move now. Chu Yang's heart sank completely. From the beginning of this battle, he had completely fallen into the opponent's rhythm. Chapter 2643. However, child of the universe, in your words, I must express my gratitude to you. Thank you for placing my world in the great tomb of this universe. Buggy said. What? Chu Yang was so shocked that his mind almost collapsed. His plan was exactly what the other wanted. I don't understand. He really did. Ha ha. The insect was very proud and even mocked. Child of the universe, the great tomb is the key to every universe. Entering it is the same as entering the depths of the universe. Originally, I didn't have the ability to enter. Even if I devoured all the worlds in this universe, I still wouldn't be able to do anything to this universe. But now, it's different. As he spoke, Chang's tone became playful. I've devoured a universe like this before, and the method I used was almost the same as now. And you, like the previous child of the universe, are a complete idiot. It immediately corrected. No, you're a bit better than that, idiot. After all, you comprehended the mysteries of the divine cauldron, and in the process of collecting the cauldron, the world of gods and your woman's world, I observed it 3 times and understood even more. Ha! Before he finished, he couldn't help but laugh crazily. He laughed so hard that it seemed like the insect was about to cry. The Gene Emperor and the supreme ruler of the gods also laughed crazily at this time. That hearty laughter drifted in the dark universe. Chu Yang's heart almost curled up. You know all my plans and even know everything about me? He could only think of such a reason. Otherwise, how could everything about him fall into the enemy's control? What do you think, adopted child? One. Chu Yang's entire body was shaken to the point that it almost disintegrated when he heard the words adopted son. He couldn't believe this at all. He felt as if someone had stabbed him in the back. The Ice Kuan was a spy. Adopted child was how the Ice Kuan described him. If the Ice Kuan was a spy, then everything about him was no longer a secret in the eyes of the other, so it was only logical. What was more worrisome was that this way, his parents and friends were all in the hands of the other. Chu Yang was almost in complete despair. He clenched his teeth and said, Good move, truly good move. Ha ha. Chong laughed out loud again. Desperate? Then I'll make you even more desperate. Do you think that servant of yours is my spy? Isn't that so? Chu Yang had originally been suspicious of the Eternal Dominator, but he trusted his own instincts. Zhu Beiji had also made him completely let down his guard in the end. Ha ha. Chong laughed even more mockingly. Chu Yang no longer held back his disdain. He sneered. How can my means be so bad? You idiot can't see it, but how can the will of the universe be so easily deceived? Chu Yang's eyes almost popped out of their socket. What do you mean? Isn't it simple? Even if it's the will of this universe, or even the will of another universe, in my hands, they're just fools that I can play with. As for you, I've long known everything about you. I'm just taking advantage of the situation to create today's situation. As Chong spoke, he fused with the Gene Emperor and the highest overlord of the gods, turning into Chu Yang's appearance. He then licked his lips and said, I'll eat the most delicious things in this universe, and then I'll eat you, then use your aura to enter your original universe and devour it as well. What do you think? Killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Not only did the insect have designs on this universe, but it also had designs on the universe that he was originally in. And he, Chu Yang, had become a sinner. Chapter 2644. Just how stupid are you? Have I already made myself clear? Not only did Buggy transform into Chu Yang's appearance, he was also imitating Chu Yang's voice. It was exactly the same, and Chu Yang could not tell the difference. Immediately, Chu Yang was shocked. Buggy was using the opportunity to talk with him, to observe him in the most direct way, to better imitate him. Horrifying! Such a scheme was simply ingrained in his bones. Every sentence of his opponent had a clear purpose. But Chu Yang had no other choice. He asked again, "Can you answer me?" "No." "Ha ha!" With this one sentence, Chu Yang's heart was suddenly overjoyed. Almost all of his grievances were swept away, and he laughed wantonly. "Your slave did not betray you, that should be your last consolation, hee. Buggy's mocking laughter grew louder, but Chu Yang's laughter also grew louder. "You little thing, are you stalling for time to comprehend the mystery of nothingness? Otherwise, how could you talk nonsense with an idiot like me for so long?" He suddenly pointed at the other him, opposite him, and sneered, "You deliberately attacked my mind, isn't it to hide something? If my guess is right, the situation in the deformed realm being swallowed like the great tomb is not so optimistic. You're not stupid, but so what, you've already changed the outcome." Buggy laughed sinisterly, then closed his eyes and sat cross-legged in the universe. "So, I'm so annoying when I laugh sinisterly." Chu Yang looked at the other who had turned into him. That sinister smile made him angry, but the other did not respond and directly entered a deep state of comprehension. Ignored. Buggy directly ignored Chu Yang's existence. In front of Chu Yang, he wanted to take the final step, comprehend the mystery of nothingness, and then kill Chu Yang. Fearless, incomparably arrogant. Buggy was sure that Chu Yang could not do anything to him. Chu Yang's anger soared to the sky, and he began to madly attack his opponent, but he soon found himself powerless. Like a mayfly trying to shake a tree, he overestimated himself and could not do anything to his opponent. He was even more laughable. "This is a waste of time. Although I have a cultivation level, my strength is too weak. If this continues, I can only give them time and opportunity." Although Chu Yang was extremely furious, he was still very calm. He quickly thought of the divine cauldron and was about to take it out to attack the other party, but he forcefully restrained himself from doing so. Between life and death, there was not only a great terror, but also a great breakthrough. The other party had yet to comprehend the profoundness of nothingness. If he used the divine cauldron wheel to smash down, he might just fall into the other party's trap and help the other party break through. Furthermore, the divine cauldron itself was related to the profound mysteries of annulled, so it was even more likely for it to evolve into such an outcome. In an instant, Chu Yang broke out in a cold sweat. He realized why the other party was trying to provoke him. Perhaps this was the purpose of the insect. What if it isn't? Wouldn't we miss a great opportunity? Immediately, another thought popped up in his mind. When he realized his own hesitation and realized that this was a psychological game of the other party that had wasted a lot of his time, he couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine. What a profound scheme! He even managed to get it right. The divine cauldron was one, and the psychological game was two. If the first scheme did not work, then the second scheme would also waste time. In the end, he realized that all he could do was to fight for comprehension. Would the other party comprehend the profoundness of nothingness first, or would he find a way to kill the other party first? Chapter 2645. At this time, he had finally calmed down, so he wasn't stupid. He threw the problem he was facing to the entire heavenly spirit world, the entire God's world, so that they could find a solution together. In the eastern wilderness, his parents, Big Brother Chu Fei, Big Sister Chu Na, as well as Little Scum, Little Guai, Little Five, Little Six, and Bing Kuan, he didn't leave out a single one. He told them everything. One person's strength was small, but the strength of many people was enormous. One person's intelligence was lacking, but the others could make up for it. Chu Yang didn't believe that the intelligence of so many people couldn't compare to a mere insect, a mayfly. He was completely determined to kill this #Yen bastard no matter what. If he didn't kill this thing, he wasn't human anymore. Time passed silently in this battle. In the dark universe, nothing changed, it was deathly silent. Chu Yang didn't move at all. The insect didn't react either. The two continued to fight like this, and finally, at some point, the insect's body started to change. Its entire body started to become blurry, some parts of its body even started to disappear. Moreover, this situation was getting more and more violent, it was getting out of hand. The insect's head was completely gone. Its neck was gone too. Its torso was also gone. In the blink of an eye, it completely disappeared, turning into nothingness, entering the state of nothingness. The insect had finally comprehended the profound mystery of nothingness. Waha! In the boundless darkness, in the silent universe, a loud laughter identical to Chu Yang's rang out. It was very happy. Idiot, I've won. The insect didn't hesitate and threw a punch at Chu Yang. The moment Chu Yang came into contact, Chu Yang completely disappeared, but the universe shook violently. Chu Yang was directly sent flying out of the state of nothingness. Chi Chiao coughed out blood. Both were in the state of nothingness, both had comprehended the profound mystery of nothingness. At the same level, Chu Yang couldn't completely dodge the insect's attack. He was heavily injured in an instant. Without hesitation, he immediately entered the space-time and started to madly flee. If their realms were equal and their strength was inferior, they could only flee. Otherwise, they would only die. Idiot, do you think you're the child of the universe? Not only are you like a fish in water, but you can also use the power of this universe to suppress my speed? I can only give you one word: naive. Chong mocked sharply. I might as well tell you directly, I have once swallowed a universe, which is at least 3 times stronger than this universe. Under the situation of completely suppressing this universe, the remaining 3 times power is more than enough to kill you. As soon as it finished speaking, its figure vanished as it once again threw a punch at a certain spot in the air. Immediately, space collapsed, and Chu Yang was blasted flying once more before exploding into pieces. Blood dyed the dark universe red, but then everything vanished. Nothingness, everything was nothingness. There was no such thing as exploding, no such thing as life and death, and no such thing as being injured. During this process, Chu Yang seemed to have gained a deeper understanding of Yuwu. He even revealed himself and let Chong Lai destroy him. Worm, do you really think you've won? Bang. Chong Lai destroyed Chu Yang without any suspense. He laughed coldly. Idiot, you're still too inexperienced to play this kind of psychological game. Do you think I don't know you're heavily injured? You know I'm heavily injured, but you also know that my understanding of Yuwu has deepened. You can't kill me. Chu Yang sneered back. Haven't you always been worried about the godly cauldron? You should be worried. Chong Lai sneered. Before you use the godly cauldron to gain a deeper understanding of Yuwu, you're already a dead man, idiot. Bang. 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 Chapter 2646. Tap. 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 The insect was no longer in a hurry. He walked over to Chu Yang and said disdainfully, "What's the result, you idiot? I beat you to death before you could comprehend the annulled level. You think a moron like you can fight me?" Ah! Chu Yang suddenly burst out laughing. "Do you know what it means to be happy too soon, insect?" He struggled to stand up, and the corners of his mouth curved into a mocking smile. "Speaking of which, I was worried that you would find out something, so I tried my best to hide it. But it seems that you're not that great. I was simply beaten up for nothing, don't you think?" "You?" The insect was puzzled to see Chu Yang baring his 8 white teeth. But when he sent out his senses, his expression flickered. "Did you only notice now, you crappy insect? Too late." Chu Yang laughed coldly and pointed at the insect. "I'm going to have little bastard eat you. Birds eat insects. You don't have a problem with that, do you? While he was speaking, a strange change occurred. From the edge of the universe, rays of cosmic light pierced through and gathered straight toward Chu Yang. Finally, they entered his body. Immediately, more than a dozen virtual shadows of the universe appeared behind him. I can't believe you can draw on the power of so many universes. Chu Yang ignored him. He teleported to the edge of the universe and threw a punch. I'll return your words to you, insect. You're too naive to think you can escape. Rumble. Space and time exploded. When this punch struck out, the insect was shockingly sent flying out from an inexplicable space and time. It was extremely surprising. At some point, the insect had almost escaped from this part of the universe. It was simply shocking. The insect was extremely crafty, and the slightest bit of carelessness allowed him to escape. The battle between the two of them was a battle of wits, a test of wit. Just now, the insect had used Chu Yang to distract Chu Yang, and then used the Gene Emperor and the Sovereign Lord as cover. It was impossible to guard against this move. After the insect was destroyed, it did not respond at all. Chu Yang did not need it to respond. I've never been beaten up by a bug before. If I don't kill you, I'm your grandson. Are you fucking proud of yourself? Are you trying to play IQ with me? If you are violent, I will teach you how to write violence. Chu Yang had a belly full of anger. He unleashed the 3-character scripture to vent it all as he crazily destroyed the bugs again and again. There was no suspense at all. The insect was quickly beaten to the point where it could no longer enter the state of anarchy. It was completely annihilated by Chu Yang and couldn't be more dead. In the end, his hands were empty. He chased after the fleeing Gene Emperor and the Sovereign of the God World, killing them one by one with a single punch. Haha. After everything was over, Chu Yang released all the pressure in his heart. All the sullenness and grievances were vented out as he laughed heartily. In the end, he still won this battle. A just cause enjoys much support while an unjust cause finds little support. If the insect wasn't a threat to the other universes, how could he communicate with the other universes through this universe and seek help from them? How could he kill the insect in the end? This battle was known as the final battle in the heavenly spirit world and the God world. After the final battle, no one saw Chu Yang's shadow again. However, everyone knew that Chu Yang was still in this world because he was waiting for the divine fragrance girl, Shangguanlan. Little bitch, come out and eat the bugs. 30 years after the final battle, Taijing City suddenly welcomed a lively day. A childish voice suddenly resounded throughout Taijing City, causing an uproar. The god of deceit is here. The god of deceit is here. The god of deceit is back. He is digging a hole again. It must be the god of deceit. Isn't that stupid bird called Little Bitch? People surged out, but when they gathered together, they saw a 3 or 4 child wearing open crotch pants. He was even sniffling from time to time. Little Wimp was very unhappy with the countless gazes. He angrily said, "What are you looking at? Haven't you seen such a talented child before? Do you have such a talented child in your family?" Haha. Everyone burst into laughter. "We are not looking at anything, we are here to look at the bird." Yes, we are here to look at the bird. That's right, we are definitely here to look at the bird. Go back and tell your father that you are really awesome wearing open crotch pants. Tisk. Little Wimp directly pointed his middle finger at everyone and said disdainfully, "This is the right of a little wimp, you can act like a hooligan in public." You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.